השתנה לילה זה מכל הלילות, מכל הלילות, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים חמץ ומצה, חמץ ומצה. הלילה זה כולו מצה, הלילה זה כולו מצה. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים שאר ירקות, שאר ירקות. הלילה זה כולו מרום, הלילה זה כולו מרום. עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורין, בני חורין. עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורין. עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורין, בני חורין. אתה בני חורין, בני חורין. והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד לבד עמלנו לכלותנו, שלא אחד לבד עמלנו לכלותנו, אלא שבכל טובתו עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, אלא שבכל טובתו עומדים עלינו לכלותנו. מה אלו 10 המכות, אלו 10 המכות, דם צפרדע כלים ארוך, ובליל עד הרבה חושך וגם מכת בכורות. המצרים קיבלו את 10 המכות, דם צפרדע כלים ארוך, ובליל עד הרבה חושך וגם מכת בכורות. המצרים קיבלו את 10 המכות. ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעמלועז, בצאת ישראל ממצרים. הייתה לקודשו, ישראל ממשלותיו, הים רב וינוס, הירדן יסוב לאחור. בצל מצרים, בצאת ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעמלועז. אלוקינו שבשמיים ובארץ, שניים אני יודע,
אני יודע,
שלוחות אלוקינו שלושה מי יודע,
אני יודע,
שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית. אלוקינו שבשמיים ובארץ, 4 מי יודע, 4 שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוקינו, 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 שמיים ובארץ. אילו הוציאנו ממצרים ולא עשינו לנו את השבת ולא קרבנו לפני הסיני. דיינו, די דיינו, די דיינו, די דיינו, 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 די דיינו, די דיינו, די דיינו, דיינו, דיינו. אילו נתנו לנו את התורה נתן לנו דיינו. אילו הכניסנו לארץ ישראל ולא בנה את בית המקדש. דיינו, 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 די דיינו, 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 די דיינו, די דיינו, די דיינו, דיינו. לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, בירושלים הבנויה, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה בירושלים, בירושלים הבנויה. לשנה הבאה 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 בירושלים, בירושלים הבנויה. הגיע פסח בא, שמחה רבה, שמחה רבה, ביבי הגיע פסח בא, תפרו, תפרו, תפרו לי בגדים, כיסים מילאו, 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 שמחה רבה, ביבי הגיע פסח בא, שמחה רבה, ביבי הגיע פסח בא, שאול, אשל, 4 קושיות שתו, שתו, 4 כוסות, שמחה רבה, ביבי הגיע פסח בא,
Chag Matzot Sameach, Passover, happy, well, we can't say Passover, because Passover is the name of the sacrifice, in the name of the holiday. Happy Festival of Unleavened Bread. And welcome to this class. So, let me just stop the music for a second. Let me unshare the screen, as usual. Reshare it. Where we go? Window, Twitter, share. Shalom, David and Ruth. Hakham.
Hakham.
Shalom, Shalom, Ruben, Aviva, sorry. What?
Moedim l'simcha. That's I was taught during Chol HaMo'ed, that's what you're supposed to say. I was taught.
You were taught well. You did a good job.
Okay.
Probably a rabbi
Something
somewhere, but
I,
that's okay. We'll forgive him this time. Hold on one second.
something I learned.
Yes, go ahead, Ruth. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Hold on one second. I just need to send a link to somebody who wanted to join the class. Okay, so all right, so let's get started. So I want to actually just give me 1 second here to organize this. Just 1 second. I'm going to put this in a different note. And there we go. Passover class. Okay. Class. I'm going to just mute you, David and Ruth, and feel free to join in. Okay, you go
We're here.
StreamYard, Ariella and Ben. That would be great. Yep, I'm just going to mute you guys. You can unmute yourselves just to prevent background noise. Okay, so the name of this class, so first of all, welcome to the class. And the name of the class is Fascinating Facts About Passover in the Tanach that you probably never knew existed. Now, let me explain the context of this class. Okay, now most Karaites actually do know that these facts exist. And the purpose of the class is, of course, to learn and teach Torah, as always. But a secondary purpose I have in the class is I'm going to be giving this class live tomorrow to the local rabbinical synagogue, about half an hour, 45 minutes actually, from where I live. And those are rabbinical Jews. So I just want to put everything in context here. This is kind of a preview. There are two purposes for me doing this class. Number one is, of course, to learn and teach. That's what I love to do. And number two is for me to get my notes in order and prepare my talking points for tomorrow's live class at the rabbinical synagogue. Okay. So that being said, this class is going to be a little bit more oriented to rabbinical Jews. Now, of course, I'm not going to contradict anything that we as Karaites generally believe, but just keep in mind that this is more geared towards beginners. In other words, people who are not familiar with the Karaite way of looking at the Tanakh, people who are for good or for better or for worse have had their minds infected, and there's no better way to say it than that, with the cult of rabbinical Judaism, with the bizarre interpretations and understandings of the Torah that rabbinical Judaism provides. So I'm gearing this basically towards a beginner audience from the point of view of Tanakh and the point of view of Qara'ism. And I'm going to be, as I go through the class, I'm going to be taking my own notes because I want to get my talking points in order for tomorrow. So that's just to put the class in context, okay? It's going to be a little bit different, and I think very enjoyable, but a little bit different from our usual Shabbat studies, which we could say are more Karaite-oriented or more advanced classes. This is going to be very much, well, it won't be your beginner's class, not by any means, but it may cover things that as a Karaites that we already know, that you already know. I know that David already sent me a whole list of answers. I didn't get a chance to go through them, but I'm sure they're right. Let me see. Where did they go? They're in the WhatsApp. Maybe I'll refer to them a little bit here and there. There we go. Pre-lecture answers. Okay. So that being said, any comments, any questions before we get going? Shalom Mar Yanana Miknana, my dear friend. Any questions or comments before we get going? Anybody? No?
I'm very anxious to learn this.
It's really, really fascinating stuff. It's really, really, really fascinating stuff. Okay.
It has been fascinating up till now. Everything has been fascinating up till now.
Really? All I did was introduce myself. Are you trying to tell me that you think I'm fascinating? How nice.
Well, what you're saying is awesome because I really didn't know most of it, and I'm just awestruck because it's so enticing and knowledgeable, and I'm a different person now.
Thank you, Ruth. I appreciate that. It's my pleasure to have the honor to help you learn Tanakh, and in turn to learn from everyone who joins these classes. Okay, so that being said, let's start with the first question, okay? And I will post it. show it on the screen. Okay, so question number 1. Did you know there is an explicit connection between Passover and the law for tefillin in the Torah? What is that connection? Now, of course, there is no law for tefillin in the Torah, but once again, this class is tomorrow going to be geared towards rabbinical Jews, so they believe there's a law for tefillin in the Torah. So let's take a look at that law. Okay, let's start with that. Let me just close this. Ooh, goodbye. And for that, we are going to go to, oh boy, where is it? It's going to be Deuteronomy 6:8, if I'm not mistaken. Deuteronomy 6:8. 6:8, yes. Okay, we shut them. Okay, yes, it's 6:8. So I'm just going to I'm taking notes for myself. So there may be little pauses here and there because I want to write down for myself the various verses that that I'm going to be covering tomorrow. So that's Deuteronomy 6:8. Shema. Okay. So if we start here, let's start in verse 4. You may or may not have heard of this verse. That's kind of a joke. We all heard of this verse. So first of all, let me just make sure the screen is on. Everybody can see the screen. Everybody can hear me correctly. Okay. So Deuteronomy 6:4 says, Shema Yisrael Yahweh Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. Okay, we all know this verse. I think we might have all heard of that verse here and there, right? That's a joke. We ahavta et Yahweh Elohecha b'chol livavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol mi'odecha. Okay, so you shall love, or you must love Yahweh your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your means. I'm just giving the standard translation, okay? We're not going to be getting deep into various meanings for this. Hayu hadavarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavacha hayom al livavecha. And these things which I command you today shall be upon your heart. Okay? Verse 7. Wa shinantam li vanecha. ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשך בך ובקומך. Okay? And you shall repeat them or teach them to your children, and you'll speak about them when you lay down to go to sleep in your house, when you walk in the street, and when you wake up and when I'm sorry, when you sit down in your house, when you walk down the street, when you go to sleep at night, and when you arise in the morning. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Okay, so now this is more geared towards Karaites. What are we talking about here? What is the subject of all of these phrases? The subject of all of these phrases is v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele. Okay, these words. Okay, these words which I command you today. What are supposed to be with these words? They're supposed to be on your heart. You're supposed to repeat them or teach them to your children. You're supposed to speak about them when you're sitting in your house, when you're walking down the street, when you lie down at night, when you wake up in the morning, right? So obviously, these are just examples, right? This is not meant to be taken literally. You don't have to walk down the street and start talking. It's not a commandment to oh, I didn't walk down the street today. Let me go down Main Street and I have to walk exactly 1.2 kilometers, which is the distance between, I don't know, Jerusalem and I don't know, the Shalom Falafel joint on Ben Yehuda Street. And if I don't do that, then I haven't satisfied the mitzvah of walking down the street. No, of course it doesn't mean that. These are just examples. It means the Torah should always be with you. It should always be in your heart and in your mind, right? Okay, but that's really for Karaites. Ukshaltam de'ot al yadecha wahayu letotafot ben einecha. Okay, so you shall bind them or tie them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as totafot, big question mark. Nobody really knows what totafot means, but it's often translated as frontlets, whatever the heck a frontlet is. Nobody knows what a frontlet is. I don't know what a frontlet is. Sometimes it's translated as jewelry. Sometimes it's translated as a remembrance, and I think that's the best translation, and we'll see why in a second. But we'll go with jewelry, and it shall be for a piece of jewelry between your eyes, right? So, of course, the rabbis interpret this as taking these words, a bunch of words in these verses and other verses, but mostly the verses from the Shema, putting them in these black boxes, Okay, I wanted to say stupid black boxes, but again, I'm trying to pretend that I'm giving the class tomorrow and gearing it towards the Rabbanites. Okay, put them in these black boxes, and they actually tie them, of course, to their hand, and they place them as frontlets, as jewelry, or as a mark between their eyes. Okay, but really, this is meant to be. Really, of course, this is meant to be figurative. Okay, it doesn't mean you literally have to put these verses in boxes and tie them to your body. Okay, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. Okay, okay, I'm not going there because it's geared towards Rabbanites. Okay, at any rate, it's a figurative phrase. Okay, but let's go on, or let's point out one thing. Shatem la'ot. Okay, they shall be tied as a sign upon your hand and as frontlets between your eyes. Okay, so this is a sign. Okay, but what is a sign? The sign is not. I'm going off my Karaites stuff again. So, but just very briefly, the sign is not that we have to actually tie them on our hands. The sign is by keeping them, by teaching them, by learning them. That's the sign, okay? Or it's just meant figuratively in a certain sense. At any rate, the key verse here is you shall tie them as a sign upon your hand and as jewelry between your eyes. Okay, verse 9. Okay, and you shall write them upon the side posts of your doors. The mezuzah is the side post. The mashkof is the top post. I think it's also called the lintel, not the lintel, but the lintel, and upon your gates. Okay, so we're not even going to go there. Okay, but at any rate, we see these are the verses in the Shema. So that's Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 8. Okay, now we want to go over to Exodus 13, as David correctly pointed out. So let's go over to Exodus. What are we doing here? Deuteronomy, no. Exodus 13. And we'll go over to the Hebrew. And we're going to start in, let's see, we're going to start in verse 3 here, okay? So we're in Exodus 13. We're in Exodus 13:3. And again, I'm just going to take a note for myself. So I'm going to go now to Exodus 13:3. 9, actually, okay? And let's start in verse 3, okay? Mark L., do rabbinical Jews have an answer for the Torah shall be in your mouth? And yeah, exactly. Thank you, Mark. I've been saying that for decades, right? It shall be upon your heart. It shall be upon your heart and upon your soul, right? What do we need to do? Wear heart tefillin and soul tefillin, and well, actually they do for the heart. They say that this is why I think the hand tefillin is supposed to point towards the heart or something like that. So that's how they deal with that one. But yes, of course. And there are many other phrases where it doesn't make any sense. All right. Anyway, we're in Exodus chapter 13. We're going to start in verse 3. Vayomer Moshe el ha'am zachor et hayom. Okay. So first of all, what are we speaking about here? Well, we'll see in a second. Okay. Zachor et hayom hazeh asher yatzatem mi Mitzrayim mi beit vadim ki b'chazak Yad Hotzi Yahweh etchem mizeh willo ye achel hametz. Okay, so Moshe said to the people, and what's the context here? This is right after the actual Exodus. The Exodus occurs. The actual Exodus from Egypt occurs in chapter 12. So this is right after the Exodus chapter. Okay. Yes. So we're here. So Moshe said to the people, remember this day. Which day? Okay, Asher Yatzatem Mitzrayim, the day on which you're going out of Egypt. When did the Israelites go out of Egypt? They went out of Egypt on the 15th day of the first month at midnight. That's when the Exodus started. That's when God's mashchit, God's destroying angel, went around and started killing all the firstborn of the Egyptians. So that's what we're talking about. Mi beit vadim, from the house of slaves, from the slave house. Ki b'chozik yad hotzi Yahweh etchem mizeh, because with a strong hand Yahweh took you out of this, out of what? Out of the house of slaves. V'lo ye achel chametz, and chametz and leavened bread shall not be eaten. Okay, we've spoken a lot about these various things, what they all mean. We're not going to get into that right now. Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh ha'aviv. On this day, you're going out in the month of the Aviv. We've spoken about Aviv a lot. We're not going to get into that right now. Okay. So, Haya ki yaviacha Yahweh el eretz hakina'ani hachiti ha ha'emori ha'chiwi ha'yebusi asher nishba la'avotecha latet lach eretz zavat halav udavash ועבדת את העבודה הזאת בחודש הזה. Okay, so it shall be when Yahweh brings you to the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the, all those people, asher nishba la'avotecha, which he swore to your fathers, letet lach eretz zavat halav udvash, to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, ועבדת את העבודה הזאת, that you shall keep this service, or you shall do this service בחודש הזה. Okay. You shall keep the service in this month. What service? We're about to find out in verse 6. Okay? 6. Shiv'at yomim tochal masoth ubeyom hashvi'i hag leYahweh. For 7 days you shall eat matzot. You shall eat unleavened breads, and on the seventh day is a festival to Yahweh. Verse 7. Matzot yachel et shiv'at ha-yomim velo יראה לך חמץ ולא יראה לך שאור בכל גבוליך. Okay, for matzot יאכל את שבעת ימים, for these 7 days, unleavened bread shall be eaten, ולא יראה לך חמץ, and חמץ shall not be seen with you or among you, ולא יראה לך שאור, and leavening agents, sourdough starter, yeast, etc. We've spoken about this again in other Passover classes, but we'll just go with yeast. Yeast shall not be, or leavening agents shall not be seen with you among all of your borders. Okay, so that's this is the avodah. This is the service that we're to keep. Okay, we're to eat matzah for 7 days, and anything that's not matzah is to be either destroyed, hidden. Okay. Just gone, out of sight at the very least, and probably destroyed. והגדת לבניך ביום ההוא, לאמור בעבור זה עשה יהוה לי בצאתי ממצרים. And you shall tell to your son or your child, your children, on this day, לאמור, saying, בעבור זה עשה יהוה לי בצאתי ממצרים. Because of that which Yahweh did for me in going out of Egypt. Okay, so in other words, we're not eating leavened bread for 7 days. Okay, this raises a question, right? Like in the Passover Haggadah of the rabbis, they got one thing right? We're doing these things which are going to raise questions for the people around us. We're going to raise questions for our children. It's going to raise questions for our neighbors. It's going to raise questions for the other nations. Why are you eating? Why are these people eating matzot for 7 days? Why are they not eating bread? That's kind of a weird thing. We've never seen this tradition before. Excuse me, could you explain to me what's going on here? We see that you're eating this unleavened bread for 7 days. And that's the excuse to answer the question and say it's because of what Yahweh did for me when I went out of Egypt. Okay. And of course, we know that very specifically, this is the reference to what happens in chapter 12, where the Israelites did not have time to let the dough leaven because they had to flee quickly from Egypt. And when they got out into the desert, they cooked that unleavened dough into matzot. Okay, that is at the very least one of the reasons we eat matzot on Chag HaMatzot. Okay, verse 9. Okay, well here we go. V'haya lecha le'ot al yadcha u'lezikaron ben einecha למען תהיה תורת יהוה בפיך כי ביד חזקה הוציאך יהוה ממצרים. And it shall be for you as a sign upon your hand and as a remembrance between your eyes. We'll get back to that in a second. Okay. למען תהיה תורת יהוה בפיך, in order that the instructions of Yahweh should be in your mouth. כי ביד חזקה הוציאך יהוה ממצרים, because with a strong hand Yahweh took you out of Egypt. Okay, we'll get back to that in 1 second because that's the key verse. Verse 10, ושמרת את החוקה הזאת למועדה מימימה מימים ימימה. And you shall keep this law, the statute, in its correct time from year to year. Okay, well, what we really want to focus on here is, so first of all, what's the context here? The context is from verses 3 to 10, we are talking about what? We're talking about the eating of unleavened bread. That's specifically what we're talking about. Okay, that's the service. Okay, where was it? Here it is, very specifically in verse 4. You shall keep this service, or you shall keep this way of worshiping God in this month. And what is it? It's for 7 days you eat matzot, or for 7 days you refrain from eating leavened bread, would be a better way to specifically state it. Okay, and then it says that this service, this sign, or this service, this eating of unleavened bread for 7 days, it shall be for you as a sign upon your hand, and as a remembrance between your eyes. Okay, well, I think we've seen this somewhere before. Let's go back again to Deuteronomy 6:8. Okay, the law supposedly for tefillin. Okay, okay, you shall bind them. What are we talking about? These words, okay, as a sign upon your hand and as frontlets between your eyes, or as totafot between your eyes. That's referring to what? Hadvarim ha'ela, these words, okay, which I command you today. The words, figuratively speaking, the words of the Torah. Here, okay, and they shall be as a sign on your hands and as a remembrance between your eyes. It's the same phrase, okay, aside from the kshatem, okay, and instead of the litotafot, which nobody really knows what it means, here in Exodus 39, we have it called not totafot, but we have it called a zikaron, which therefore implies, at least to me, that the word totafot is synonymous with zikaron, meaning a remembrance. Okay, maybe not, but that is as good a guess as any. Okay, so here we're being told that the eating of matzah for 7 days is a sign. Okay, what is a sign? A sign is an outwardly visible thing that can be seen. Okay, and that sign is the act of eating matzot for 7 days. Okay, this shall be a sign upon your hand and as a remembrance between your eyes. It's exactly the same phraseology that we have here. In this case, you shall tie it as a sign on your hand, and it shall be as totafot between your eyes, frontlets or jewelry or a remembrance between your eyes. What is it here? Here it's keeping the mitzvot of Yahweh. Here it is eating matzot for 7 days. And that, my friends, is the connection between the laws of Passover, or at least the laws of Chag HaMazoth, the eating of matzot for 7 days, and the laws that the rabbis say are the laws for tefillin. Okay. There was one other thing I wanted to say, but it's escaping my mind. 1 second. Right. Okay. So I wanted to say that the rabbis, they interpret this verse in a bizarre way. So this is, again, it's not, I'm going to be not saying this in the class tomorrow when I'm giving it to the Rabbanites. I'm saying it now to us Karaite oriented or Karaite interested Jews at the very least. Okay. So if you go through these verses with the rabbis, okay, they say that everything up to here is talking about the exodus from Egypt and the binding of tefillin, the binding of the black boxes to one's body, and then suddenly it switches over here to tefillin. All of a sudden, it mentions tefillin. That's what they believe, okay? That this has nothing to do with the exodus from Egypt. Maybe it does tangentially, but it's not speaking about eating matzah or the exodus from Egypt. That this now, they throw in the law of tefillin in verse 9, and then right here, they go back to keeping it from year to year, okay? To eating Passover from year to year. It's nonsensical. They believe that the Torah is basically, I don't know, schizophrenic or psychotic. It just jumps around illogically, right? From here to here, we're talking only about Chag HaMazoth, and all of a sudden in verse 9, according to the rabbis, it throws in the law for tying black boxes on your hand, which has absolutely nothing directly to do with Chag HaMazoth. And yes, they come up with all kinds of reasons why it does have something to do with it, et cetera, but that's really what they believe. And if you learn these verses with a rabbinical Jew, they'll say, oh, all the verses they're talking about eating matzah. Oh, verse 9 is talking about tefillin, and verse 10 is going back to talking about matzah. The point is that it just shows how wrong and how ridiculous their understanding of this phrase, okay, as meaning as being taken literally and tying actual boxes to your body. It just shows how ridiculous it is, okay? Because it's clear that the meaning from here to here, that we're speaking only about eating unleavened bread, and that verse 9 is also talking about eating unleavened bread, and it's just using that phrase, which we see many times throughout the Tanakh, this or similar phrases, which is saying that by eating that unleavened bread, this is a sign. A sign is something that's outwardly visible, that is going to cause other people to question what's going on, or to see it, or to realize that we're doing something special, we're doing something different, and this is going to be a sign. It's going to be like a remembrance between your eyes, or jewelry between your eyes, and it's referring to Chag HaMazoth. So Chag HaMazoth is the sign. By eating unleavened bread, that's the sign to our children, to ourselves, to our families, to the rest, to the entire nation of Israel, to the entire world, that we are keeping this service, which we are enjoined to do in the surrounding verses. Okay? All right. Any questions, any comments? Anybody? Ruth, you with us?
I had a quick comment. Pinnacles.
Yes, David.
You might want to explain to them. They're going to have an obvious question. Why don't you take the matzah and wear it on your head and put it on your hands? Because that's their mentality.
You know what?
And they're going to think that the Karaites would interpret it literally. So obviously,
no, they're not that stupid.
But you might want to explain to them why we don't do that.
I don't want to get this. I don't want to turn this into.
I have something.
Yes.
Okay.
I have something.
Yes, Ruth.
Couldn't that mean when you put the sign on your hand, that means what you're doing, your act? When you do something, you do it with your hands. When you make whatever you do in life, you're doing it with your hands. I know, because I had a broken.
Ruth, I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you. I don't know if it's on my side or it's on your side, but I can't hear a word you're saying. It might very well be on my side, and if so, I apologize.
Have a word for brain?
I can't hear what you're saying.
No?
No. You want to try one more time?
Oh, am I here? Oh, okay. All right. Did you hear the hand part?
No, I didn't hear
Did you
anything.
hear the hand part?
No, I didn't hear anything.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, no, I hear you.
Okay.
Try talking now.
Okay.
Don't talk so loud.
With your hand, when you
Yes.
have your hand, could that mean it's the things that you do? Because you.
You broke up again. All right, we're gonna move on. Okay, you can text it or you can ask me later. Okay, but I wanna keep moving. All right, so on to question 2. Okay, so let me put that up. Okay, what is the connection between Passover and the children of Israel's entry into the land of Israel after wandering in the desert, after 40 years wandering in the desert? Okay, so for this, we are going to go to the book of, anybody want to tell me which book we're going to go to for this one? Oh, did I skip one? Oops, I skipped one. I numbered this. Oh, I see it. Renumbered it. Oh, God, it's renumbering it for me. How nice. All right. Okay, let me try this again. Oh, boy. All right. Jeez. All right. Let me hold on 1 second here. I'm sorry. So this is 1. Just give me a second here. I can renumber things. 2, 3. Oh, gosh. 1 second, please. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is now 3. This is now 4. Okay, that goes there. Now 5. This is now 6. 1 second, please. I'm sorry. And this is now 7. Do that. All right. Does it? Oh my lordy. Tab. There we go. Okay, so I think I got it now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so let me restate the question here. Okay, so question number 2 is, let me repost it. So, did you know that Passover in the Torah is closely linked to conversion to Judaism? What is the link? Well, we've spoken about this quite extensively in the past, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But for this, we want to go to Exodus chapter 12. Okay. And we want to start here in verse 43. So in Exodus 12, 43. Okay. And let me just see one thing here. For that, I want to bring up this. Where's my Passover stuff? Passover laws. 1 second. Okay, so we're going to start in Exodus 12. Okay, and actually I spoke about this extensively over Shabbat. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. This is very central in a certain sense to Qara'im. But yeah, let's just get into it. Let me mark down where I am. So this is going to be Exodus 12:43. Alrighty. So Exodus 12:43. ויאמר יהוה אל משה ואהרון זאת חוקת הפסח כל בן נכר לא יאכל בו. Okay, so now we're going to go into the laws for the Passover offering in subsequent years. There's the original Passover, and then each year, miyamim yamima, at that time, as we saw in Exodus 13, we're supposed to do two things. We basically keep two sets of laws. Okay, number one is the bringing of the Passover sacrifice on the 14th of the first month after the sun goes down, basically the beginning of the 15th of the first month. And the second is right following that, the eating of unleavened bread for 7 days. Okay, so now we're talking about the Passover offering, and we want to examine what is the connection between the Passover offering and conversion, quote unquote, conversion to Judaism, or as we would state in more Tanachic terms, in becoming a ger. Okay. ויאמר יהוה אל משה ואהרון. So Yahweh said to Moshe and Aaron, Zot chokat ha-Pasach. This is the statute of the Passover offering, and whenever you see the word Pesach, with very few exceptions, it always means not the festival of what we call Passover, not the 7 days of HaMo'ed, not the 7 days of eating unleavened bread, but rather the Passover offering. So this is the statute of the Passover offering, called Ben Nechar Lo Yochal Bo. Anyone who is literally a son of a stranger, okay, foreigner, okay. Nechar means distant or foreign, okay. So basically, it means any foreigner shall not eat of it. Okay, what is a foreigner? A foreigner is someone who has no connection with Israel whatsoever. Okay, someone who lives, I don't know, in the Philippines, or and follows whatever religion he might follow there, or lives in Siberia or something like that. Right? They have no connection whatsoever with Israel. Okay, that's what a foreigner is. Okay, what we would call in modern parlance, well, a goy. That's what we're talking about here. All right, so v'chol eved ish niknat kasef mata oto az yochal bo. So now we're talking about, well, let me translate word for word. And every slave of a man, which he has purchased, the purchase of money, or which he has purchased with money, umalta oto az yochal bo. And if you circumcise him, then he made it. Okay, So in ancient Israel, there was slavery. Okay, you could purchase slaves. Israelites could purchase slaves. This was common among basically all of the cultures back then, and until recently, as we all know, and it's still in some places like Libya. There are slave markets in Libya since the United States decided to topple Gaddafi, who was actually seemed to be a pretty good ruler over Libya in many ways, and also very possibly Jewish. And there's a YouTube video or an article about that. I think at least from his mother's side. So at any rate, neither here nor there. And actually, I think in Mauritania, slavery was only outlawed in 2008 or something like that. Mauritania is a country that is south of Morocco. I've been to Morocco about 5 times. I've spent a lot of times in Morocco. I've never been to Mauritania, but I would love to visit there. Fascinating place. At any rate, so anyone who is the slave of a man, which he purchased with money, if you circumcise him, he may eat of it. Okay. So basically, what this is saying is that so a slave is a permanent part of a man's household because you purchase the slave, and he and actually all his descendants become a permanent part of a person's household. Okay. I don't know if I'd call them family, but they are members, they're permanent members of the household. Anyone who's a permanent member of an Israelite's household is basically can attain the status of ger, and that's no exception for the slave. Okay, but not eat of the Passover offering. Okay, if he's a ben nechar. Okay, if he's a foreigner. Okay, but if you circumcise him, then he may eat of it. Okay, so this shows that circumcision is basically shall we say, as I said when we spoke about it on Shabbat, circumcision is basically the initiation ceremony for males into the people of Israel. Okay, what is the initiation ceremony for females into the nation of Israel? It's marriage. If you marry an Israelite man, then you as a woman basically become an Israelite if you're not ready. Okay, if you were born to an Israelite father, you're born an Israelite. If you are not born an Israelite, if you're a female and you're not born an Israelite, if you marry an Israelite, then you become an Israelite. Okay, so obviously you cannot circumcise a woman. At least we're not Muslims, so we don't circumcise women. At any rate, so if you have a slave, okay, if you circumcise him, then he may eat of it. Okay, so what does that mean? It says bin nechar. Okay, a foreigner may not eat of the Passover sacrifice. So this would imply that once you circumcise your slave, if he may eat of it, then he's no longer a foreigner. He's basically part of the nation of Israel. And this shows here the connection between the Passover sacrifice and conversion. Okay, now I want to point something out. This is not saying, as one particular Karaite runs around the world trying to say, that you have to bring the Passover sacrifice as part of the conversion ceremony or as part of the initiation into the land of Israel. No, it's not saying that at all. I'm sorry, into the people of Israel. The initiation into the people of Israel is one thing and one thing only. For males, that's circumcision. Okay, it's very clear in a lot of different places. Okay, it's circumcision. Okay, and by circumcising, you will now become a permanent part of the nation of Israel. It doesn't mean that everyone who is circumcised is a member of the nation of Israel. But if you want to become a part of the nation of Israel and you're a male, you must circumcise. Now you're a member of the nation of Israel, basically as a permanent, shall we say, adjunct to the nation of Israel, as basically a ger, okay, a convert, okay. Az yochalbo, now you may eat of it, okay, because the native born and the gerim may eat of it, okay, and that is the connection between conversion to Judaism, quote unquote, and the Passover sacrifice. However, I do want to point out again, I disagree with this one Karaite who's running around the place saying that you have to bring the Passover sacrifice as a way to complete your conversion. Well, we can't bring the sacrifice, but if we could, that's what he believes. Okay, I don't think that's what it's saying here at all. It just means that if you are a male and you have brought and you want to enter the nation of Israel, you do so by circumcision, and now you have the right, or actually the obligation, to bring the Passover sacrifice. Okay, verse 45. If your dad is Ashkenazic Jewish on his dad's side, then you're Israel and Jewish, right? As a woman, I'm not sure exactly what you're saying. The way I understand it, if your father is Israelite, doesn't matter who you are Israelite. Okay? And how is your father Israelite? If his father was Israelite. Yes, I just did say God's name. Oh my God. Yes, we Karaites say God's name. At least this one does. Okay. So, what was I going to say? Yes, patrilineal descent. That's what the Torah clearly points out. That's what we as Karaites generally believe. Everything is patrilineal descent. You take on the status of your father. If your father was an Israelite, you are an Israelite. If your father was of the tribe of Dan, you are of the tribe of Dan. Doesn't matter if you're a male or female. It depends on what your father is. Okay. If your mother was of the tribe of Asher and your father was of the tribe of Dan, then you are of the tribe of Dan. Okay. At least for a male or female, keeps her status until she gets married. Okay. I'm not going to get into all of that now. There are a couple of laws in the Torah which clearly point that out. Okay. But a female will acquires the status of the household she belongs to. When she's a child, when she's young and in her father's house, she has the status of her father. When she gets married, she acquires the status of her husband. So let's say she's a daughter. Let's say her father is of the tribe of Naphtali. Then she's born a Naphtaliite. If she marries, let's say, a Kohen, then now she takes on the status basically of being Kohanic, of being of a Kohen family, okay, or whatever else, okay. That's the way it works for a female. She takes on the status of the household she belongs to. When she's a child, it's her father's status. When she gets married, it's her husband's status. Okay. There is no explicit conversion for females. Okay, because you cannot circumcise a female. We're not Muslims. We don't go there figuratively and literally. But a female's entrance into the nation of Israel is to marry an Israelite man, and then her children will take on the status of her husband, which he has taken on. In other words, the children take on the status of the household they are born into. Okay, and so do the slaves take on the status of the household that they are purchased into. And anyone who's a permanent part of a household, they take on the status of that household, which is defined by the status of the head of the household, which is defined by the head of the household, which is the father, okay, the patriarch of the household. All right, okay, all right. Let's move on here. Toshav v'sachir lo yochal bo. So toshav v'sachir. I'm not going to get into this again. We went into this extensively on Shabbat, but very briefly, a toshav is what I would call a green card holder. Okay, someone who is not a naturalized citizen but is living permanently in Israel, and a sachir is a day or seasonal laborer, maybe someone who has a work visa, right? Someone who doesn't have permanent residence in Israel, but has the right to work, right? Is in Israel on a work visa. Okay, lo yochal bo. So they are not permanent members of the nation of Israel. They cannot eat the Passover sacrifice. Okay, verse 46. B'bayit echad yechal ye'achel lo totzi min habayit min habasar chutza ve'etzem lo tishperu bo. It shall be eaten in one house. Lo totzi min habayit. You shall not take it out of the house. Min habasar chutza. You shall not take of the meat out of the house. Ve'etzem lo tishperu bo, and you shall not break any bone of it. Okay, talking again, laws of the Passover sacrifice. In other words, the Passover sacrifice has to be treated with reverence. Okay, you don't start breaking its bones. You don't take it out into the street. Okay, it's not just a hamburger that you buy at the Burger Ranch or Burger King or kosher Burger King or wherever you get, or I don't know, Five Guys or whatever you get your hamburgers from. It is a holy to Yahweh. It's a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt, and it's to be treated with reverence. Okay, verse 47. Kol adat Yisrael ya'asu oto. Okay, all of the congregation of Israel shall do it. Okay, so anyone who's part of Adat Yisrael, the congregation of Israel, has to slaughter and eat the Passover sacrifice, and we'll get a little bit more of an idea of what that means. Okay, verse 48. V'chi yarur itcha ger asa pesach liyahweh himol lo kol zachar wa'az yikrav la'asoto wahaya ki ezarach ha'aretz v'chol arer lo yochel bo. Okay, so if a ger, what is a ger? What we would call basically, I just pressed on that. Whoops. What we would basically call in modern parlance a convert. Okay, and we're in verse 48, so let me just highlight that. A ger is someone not who just passes through Israel. A ger is someone who's decided they want to be a permanent part of the nation of Israel. What would be a classic example of a ger? Uriah Hittite. Okay, Uriah the Hittite. Volk, can I help you? What are you doing? Okay, but please do it quietly, okay? Uriah the Hittite, he was a ger, okay? He was a permanent member of the nation of Israel. Someone who decides to permanently throw in their lot who comes from a foreign nation and decides to permanently throw in their lot with the nation of Israel. Okay, in ancient times, this meant one and one thing only. This meant living in the land of Israel among the people of Israel. In this day and age, I don't know what to say. Even the people of Israel don't live in the land of Israel, so I don't know how that applies. But I will say one thing: if you really want to cement your connection, if you are a foreigner and you really want to cement your connection to the people of Israel as a ger, then the best way to do that is to move to the land of Israel. That definitely, besides circumcising yourself, accepting Yahweh as your God, committing to follow the Torah, then the best way to become a ger is to move to the land of Israel. Then no one can question whether you are a ger or not, if you do those things. As a woman, if you marry an Israelite, okay? Or if you marry a ger, then you take on the status of ger because you take on the status of your husband, okay? But a ger is a part of the Adat Yisrael, of the community of Israel, okay? Verse 48, so if a convert lives with you, okay, a permanent convert into the people of Israel, lives among you, okay? And he wants to bring the Passover to he wants to bring the Passover sacrifice. Can you hold on 1 second, please? I apologize. 1 second, please. Finish. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so if a permanent, if someone wants to permanent, oh, geez, my battery is about to go, so I'll have to stop for a second. If someone wants to permanently be part of the people of Israel, okay, and they want to bring the Passover sacrifice to Yahweh. They want to partake in the Passover sacrifice. Okay, he must not sacrifice every male in his household. He must circumcise every male in his household. Please do not sacrifice every male in your household. That would not be good. That is definitely against the Torah, explicitly so. Okay, he must circumcise every male member of his household. And then he may come close to do it. He may approach to do it. Okay. So let's pick this apart a little bit. Okay. So this is talking about. So it does say if a ger lives among you and wants to bring the Passover sacrifice, then he must circumcise every male in his household. Okay, he must circumcise every male. This would imply that he's already a ger, and if he wants to bring the Passover sacrifice, that he has to circumcise. But that's not really what it means. That's not really the way the language of the Torah works, or biblical Hebrew always works. This is saying if he wants to become a ger, okay? Okay, if someone lives with you who wishes to become a ger, okay, and bring the Passover sacrifice to Yahweh, then he must circumcise every male in his household. Again, this is pointing to what we saw earlier in verse 44, involving the Eved, involving the slave. Okay, if a foreigner wants to permanently join himself to the people of Israel, if he wants to become a permanent member of the people of Israel, if he wants to cast in his lot permanently with the people of Israel, then, okay, he must circumcise himself and his household, and then he can bring the Passover sacrifice. Okay, then he may bring the Passover sacrifice. Okay, and then it says, and again, I want to point out that there are some Karaites, and one in particular, who runs around the world saying that this verse is saying that in order to become a ger, that part of the initiation ceremony for becoming a ger is bringing the Passover sacrifice. This is not, in my strong opinion, what this is saying. The only initiation, the only way to become a ger, the only way to become a permanent member of the nation of Israel, if you are male, is to circumcise yourself, and then you're now a permanent part of the nation of Israel, and now you may bring, or even must bring, the Passover sacrifice. You must partake in the Passover sacrifice. Okay? All right, lasoto. And he becomes like a native born of the land. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, it means that now, just like someone who is a born Israelite, okay, who has an Israelite father, okay, or is a father who's a ger, okay, but an Israelite father, he is now like a native-born Israelite in respect to what? In respect to bringing the Passover sacrifice. In other words, he may now or must now partake in the Passover sacrifice. Okay, but v'chol arel lo yochal bo. But anyone who is uncircumcised may not eat of it. Okay, so we're making a distinction between someone who's circumcised and someone who's uncircumcised, and this is the connection between quote unquote conversion and or the Passover sacrifice and conversion. Okay, that if you want to bring the Passover sacrifice, you must, if you're not an Ezrach, if you're not a native-born Israelite, then you must first become a ger. How do you become a ger? You do so by, if you're a male, by circumcising yourself and your family, and now you are a ger, and now you may or must, better said, partake in the Passover sacrifice, because the Passover sacrifice is not optional; it's obligatory. Okay, verse 49: Torah ehad yeh la'izrach la'izrach u lager hagar bitochachem. Okay, one instruction, one Torah shall be for the native-born and for the convert who lives among you, for the permanent convert who lives among you. Okay. Now again, there's that same Karaite who runs around the world saying that this is a blanket statement, meaning that there is no distinction now between the native-born and the convert. That is not the case. This is saying when it says Torah Achad, it's not referring to the entire Torah. The word Torah means set of instructions, and the set of instructions it's referring to are the set of instructions relating to the bringing of the Passover offering. So once a person circumcises and becomes a ger, now the same instructions apply to him as apply to the native-born with respect to the Passover offering. What does that mean? Okay, he has to eat it inside his house. He can't take it outside of the house. He cannot break the bone in it, and all of the other laws that go along with the bringing of the Passover sacrifice. Okay, so that is the connection between. Okay, no problem, Marianne. Talk to you soon. Okay, so that is the connection. That is the connection between the Passover sacrifice and conversion. Okay, so that's our second question. Did you know that Passover in the Torah is closely linked to conversion to Judaism? What is the link? Okay, that's question number 2 we've spoken about now. Any questions, any comments on that one? Anybody want to say anything? If not, we'll go on to question 3. But you guys have to give me a second because I have to go get my plug to charge in. Yes, I know I should have my plug with me when I start, but it actually gives me an excuse to go stretch my legs for 2 minutes. So I'm going to go do that. I will just put it on mute. And actually, should I put on a song? Let's put on a song. I'll put on a song for a minute, and we'll be right back already. Let's see. What can we do here? Passover songs, Pesach. What is it? Shirei Pesach. Not Gabay. Okay. We'll do this. Machrozet Shirei Pesach Beretzef im Rinat Gabay and Mimi. I don't know who Mimi is, but we're about to find out. Okay. Be right back.
שישו ושמחו בשמחת חג, מחאו כפיים, נגנו ושירו בקול חזק ובמצלתיים, יד ביד כולנו פה-אחד, פה ושם נבוא, שטח לאל וגיל ישראל, הייתה שמחה ואורה. עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורין, בני חורין. היינו, אתה בני חורים, עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורים, עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורים, אתה בני חורים. מהר משה צווה פרעה, שלח נא את עמי, מצוות האל אמור נא לו, שלח נא את עמי. קום נא, לך נא, אל כבד הלב הרע, צב לו בשמי, שלח נא את עמי. הגיע ישראל לים, שלח נא את עמי, טבעו מצרים עם רכבם, שלח נא את עמי. זהו, סוף כבד הלב הרע, ככה צב לו, כן.
Okay, we're back. All right, let's stop the music. That was cute. Let me reshare the screen. Okay, so we are now up to question 3. Let me post question 3. So question 3, what is the connection between Passover and the children of Israel's entry into the land of Israel after wandering in the desert for 40 years? Okay. So, for this, we are going to go to, well, David pointed out Shemot 13:5, which we spoke about already. So let's just look at that verse very briefly. Okay. And that is a good place to start. I think I'll use this verse tomorrow for my shiur. But we'll read 13:5. V'haya ki yaviacha Yahweh el eretz haKenaani, haChiti, haEmori, haChiti, haChiyuvi, haYebusi, asher nishba lavotecha. So it shall be when Yahweh brings you to the land of the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, asher nishba lavotecha, which he swore to your fathers, l'tet lach eretz zavat chalav udvash, to give you a land flowing with milk of honey. Milk and honey, that you shall worship, or you shall keep this service, keep the ceremony in this month. And then it goes on, of course, as we saw before, to speak about the eating matzah, refraining from leavened bread for 7 days. Okay, so very good, David. Thank you for that verse. That's a good place to start. So that's Exodus 13:5. I'm just going to make a note for myself here. But where I'd really like to go on this one is the book of Joshua, where it becomes very, very, very explicit. And I think it's Joshua 5, I think it starts in. Let's see here. Yes, Joshua 5. Let's see if we want to go back to Joshua 4. Yes, Israel, they took 12 stones. 1 second. Yeah, we'll start here in Joshua 4:19. Right? Maybe we don't want to start on the 10th day of the first month. They went up from Jordan and camped in Gilgal. One second. All right, we'll start in Joshua 4:19. Okay, so let me just make a note for myself. Okay, so Joshua 4:19. I'm going to read in the English until we get to vert, just to make it move a little bit more quickly. Okay, I'm going to read in the English until we get to verses that we really want to. Okay, so we're in Joshua 19. On the 10th day of the first month. By the way, okay, so already we see it here. Okay, this is the people coming out of crossing the Jordan River, basically. Okay, so just as the Red Sea parted, so the Jordan River parted, the Israelites passed through. Okay, Joshua kind of like did a mini Moses thing. It's not as impressive to part the Jordan River as it is to part the Dead Sea, but not bad, you know. Great, you know, E for effort, or you know, great, you know, good going. So, all right. So, and now on the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan River, and camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. By the way, we visited Gilgal. I visited with Bruce Brill a couple years ago, at least what they think might be the ancient biblical Gilgal. And there's like nothing there. It's just kind of I think there's some archaeological ruins there, if I remember correctly, but that may or may not be the ancient Gilgal. At any rate, on the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. Okay, so so this is where they enter the land. Okay, when do they enter the land? They enter the land when? On the 10th day of the first month. What is the first month? The 10th day of the first month is 5 days before Passover, right? It's 5 days before the beginning of Chag HaMazoth, of Passover. Not in addition, just tangentially, it also happens to be the day that on the first Passover, the Israelites were supposed to take a seh. We're supposed to take a. That's not what we have to do. And let's get our phrases here. We're supposed to take a seh. Let's find our animal terms. One second. Oh, jeez. Animal terms. So a seh, very specifically, is any sheep or goat. Okay. So on the 10th day of the first month, they were supposed to take of that original Passover, meaning the actual Exodus from Egypt. That's when they were supposed to choose a sheep or a goat and put it aside to slaughter it on the 14th day after sunset, or on the beginning of the 15th day. Okay, so on the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan River, and camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. Jericho is the first city that the Israelites are going to attack, as we know, right? And the walls came tumbling down and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's going to be their first place of attack. But now they've emerged in Gilgal, which is actually in the land of Israel. So on the 10th day of the first month, they came into the land of Israel. Okay. Up at Gilgal, the 12 stones they'd taken out of the Jordan. Okay. He said to the Israelites, in the future, when your descendants ask their parents, what do these stones mean? I think we're going to just skip ahead because this is not specifically relevant. Okay. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he'd done to the Red Sea. So we're going to remember this crossing of the Jordan, just as we remember the crossing of the Red Sea. Let's move on now to Joshua 5. Okay. And we're going to start in Joshua 5:2. Really, that's where we should go to next. Let me just mark this down for myself. Joshua 5:2. So Joshua 5:2. Okay. So the Israelites are in Gilgal. They've emerged. Joshua split the Jordan River. Moses split the Red Sea. And now we see at that time, Yahweh said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Giv'at Aralot, which means the hill of foreskins, or the hill of the uncircumcised, right? You can imagine what must have been there after 1 million Israelites circumcised, right? You can just kind of picture why they might call it the hill of foreskins, right? Don't think about it too much because you'll throw your lunch up, but Okay, verse 4. Now this is why he did so. All those who came out of Egypt, all the men of military age, died in the wilderness on the way after leaving Egypt. All the people that came out had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness during the journey from Egypt had not. Right? So we find out a very, very interesting that while the Israelites were walking through the desert, the babies that were born were not circumcised. Okay, it's an amazing thing, but they weren't. Why? We can think about it. We can wonder about it. Probably because the Israelites maybe had to move around a lot, so they couldn't constantly be circumcising babies because maybe it would be dangerous for the babies to move. I don't know. It's all speculation, but it says very explicitly that there was no circumcision in the desert. Okay. Now the Israelites go into the land, and the first thing they do is circumcise. The Israelites had moved about the wilderness for 40 years until all the men who were of military age when they left Egypt had died, since they had not obeyed the Lord. Right. That's going back to the punishment for the spies. For Yahweh had sworn to them that they would not see the land he had solemnly promised their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So I think we can skip ahead here. Let's see. On the evening of, okay, this is where we really want to get to, Joshua 4:10. Okay. So mark this down. So that's Joshua 5:2. Right, so I can actually skip this part when I'm doing this talk tomorrow. So really want to get to Joshua 5:10. Joshua 5:10. Let me mark that down. Joshua 5:10. Okay. So all right. Starting in Joshua 10. So now we're going to switch over to the Hebrew because this is where it gets important. Okay. So we saw the Israelites arose. They came out of the Jordan River. They crossed the Jordan River and came out of the Jordan River on the 10th day of the first month, right before Passover, right before Chag HaMazoth. Okay. Then they circumcised, and now it is the evening of the 14th day of the month, of the first month, in other words. And let's switch over to the Hebrew. Joshua 5:10. Okay. Just 1 second here. I just want to check one thing. Just want to go back to English for 1 second, just for myself. Right. Okay. Fine. Okay. So we are now in Joshua 5:10. Okay. And Joshua 5:10 says, "Wa yahnu bnei Israel bagilgal ya'asu et haPesach be'arba'a asar yom lachodesh ba'erev aravot Yericho." Okay. So the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal. That's the same place they emerged from the Jordan River, the same place they circumcised. Okay. Yasu at the Pesach, and they did the Passover offering. They brought the Passover offering ba'arba asar yom lechodesh, on the 14th day of the month, ba'erev, in the evening. Okay. We know that the commandment for bringing the Passover offering is to bring it on the 14th day of the month, ben ha'arba'im. Okay, between the evenings. That means between sunset and total darkness after the sun sets on the 14th day of the first month. Basically, at the beginning of the 15th day of the first month, that's when we're supposed to be. The beginning of the 15th day of the first month, that's when the Israelites, that's when we are supposed to bring the Passover offering. And that's what they're doing here. It doesn't say here, ben arba'im. It says ba'erev. In the evening, it means exactly the same thing. Okay? The evening means the mixing time between day. The word erev comes from the underlying root ayin resh vet, Resh Bet, which means a mixture or to mix, and it means it's not quite day, it's not quite night, it's a mix between day and night. That's the Hebrew conception of the evening. Okay, Ba'aravot Yericho, in the wilderness of Jericho. Right, they were in Gilgal, and they were just to the east of Jericho, which that'll be their first attack on the land. Okay. So they brought the Passover right after they emerged. They emerged from the Jordan River on the 10th of the first month, and now they brought the Passover offering on the 14th of the first month. So they ate from the land. In other words, they started eating land on the day after the Passover offering. What does that mean? Day, first month, maybe in the middle of the night, right? They ate the next morning. Okay, so they ate unleavened bread, because after all, we are now in the feast of unleavened bread. We brought the Passover offering, so they're keeping the feast of unleavened bread. Kalui means roasted. Basically, what it means is roasted wheat grains, roasted wheat or barley, roasted grains from the wheat family. Okay, you take the grains, you roast them, right? Kind of like popcorn that doesn't wear, and then you could munch on it, or maybe make it into a porridge or a broth or something like that. Okay, but this is also, kalui is also unleavened, right? Because it's not bread. Okay, it's not flour. It's not ground into flour and then made into bread with a leavening agent. Okay, it's just the wheat berries that are roasted. Okay, on this very day. So meaning on the 15th day of the first month, that's when they began for the first time to eat off the produce of the land. In other words, they began eating from the land of Israel when? After they brought the Passover sacrifice on the 14th, or after sunset on the 14th of the first month, the beginning of the 15th of the first month. That's when they begin eating the produce of the land, not before. So they entered the land of Israel on the 10th, but they didn't until the 15th of the first month. What were they eating up until then? Well, let's look at verse 12. Verse 12, Wa ishbot Haman and the manna ceased on the following day, meaning that same day, that 15th day of the first month, the day following the Passover offering, when they began or when they started to eat from the land. Okay, and there was no more children of Israel. And they ate from the produce of the land of Canaan. Okay, so when did the manna stop? On Passover. On the first day of Passover is when the manna stopped. Okay, the manna started when the Israelites were out in the desert, right? And they were told that God is going to buy from the heavens and they're going to go out and gather it 40 years earlier. Okay, and now on the first day of Passover, the manna stops. So again, what's the connection between the Israelites entered into the land of Israel on the 10th month, 5 days before Passover, before the Passover offering. For 5 days, they continued eating the manna in the land of Israel on the day of the first month after sunset, or really the beginning of the 15th day of the first month, right after sunset. They brought the Passover offering, and then they started eating from the produce of the land. And what did they eat? They ate matzot, they ate unleavened bread, and kalui, another form of unleavened grain, right? And that's when they started eating from the produce of the land of Israel on the first day of Passover. Okay, and that is the connection between the Israelites entering into the land and between the Passover and the children of Israel's entry into the land of Israel after 40 years of wandering in the desert. And that answers our question number 3. Any questions, any comments about this? Anybody? No? Okie dokie. Let's go on. Let me take a drink of water. All right. Are you guys enjoying the class so far? I think it's absolutely fascinating stuff. All right, so now we're going to go on to question 4. This is an interesting one. This is actually a fascinating one. Great. Glad you're enjoying it. Okay, question number 4. Will we keep the Passover in the future? What does the Tanakh have to say about this? Well, what do you think? Are we going to keep the Passover in the future? Well, let's see what we got. All right, so first of all, let's establish the centrality of Passover and Chag HaMazoth. Okay, so for that, we're going to go back to our good old friend Exodus 13, and we'll read one of the verses that we read before. Oops, I think I wrote down the wrong verse in my notes here. 13:3 is what we want. Okay, we read these verses before, but we'll just read through them again. Okay, so Exodus chapter 13, verse 3. So Moshe said to the people, Hayom hazeh asher yatzatem mitzrayim mibet avadim ki b'chazeh. Okay, so Moshe said to the people, remember this day which you came out of the land of Egypt, which you came out of Egypt, mibet avadim, from the house of slaves, because with a strong hand Yahweh took you out from there, from the house of slaves, v'lo yechel chametz, and you shall not eat chametz. Okay, so we're commanded, not just here, but this is a common theme throughout the entire Torah, and also to a certain degree throughout the Tanakh, the importance of remembering this day. Okay, as I've said many times, the Exodus from Egypt is it's the central, it's the foundational event in establishing the relationship between Yahweh and the people of Israel. There was a relationship between the patriarchs and Yahweh, right? But the establishment of the relationship between Yahweh and the nation of Israel, now grown, which is now incubated within the land of Egypt into a full nation, okay, 600,000 people, is this event, the Exodus, the taking of the children of Israel out of Egypt. It's the foundational event. It's an extremely, extremely important event, and that's why bringing the Passover sacrifice is extremely important. If you don't bring the Passover sacrifice, anyone who does not intentionally not bring the Passover sacrifice, then the punishment is Karaites, is excision, okay, is exclusion from the people of Israel. Okay, that's how important it is, and Passover is mentioned many, many times throughout the Torah, and to a lesser degree also throughout the Tanakh. Okay, so the centrality of this of the Passover offering, and followed by the 7 days of eating unleavened bread, was absolutely central to the relationship between Yahweh and the people of Israel. Okay, that's just to establish just how important this is, right? So any idea that we might keep it in the future is actually would be pretty shocking. However, Torah implies. Okay, and let's find it. Let me find it. One second. Let me hear it. 1 second. I've got to go close the door here. People are making noise. Okay. All right, so where is it? It's 9:16 or 69. I always forget. 1 second. No, it's got to be 69. 1 second. Just give me 1 second here to find the verse. No, where the heck is it? Why can't I find the verse I'm looking for? 1 second. שתות כי כה אמר אדוני צבאות אלוהי ישראל הנה משבית מן המקום הזה לעיניכם ובימיכם כל ששון וכל שמחה עשה וירא כי תגיד לעם הזה את כל הדברים האלה ואמרו אליך על מה דיבר יהוה אלינו I don't know why I can't find it. One more try. You know what? Let me put on a song for 5 minutes while I find the verse I'm looking for. That'll be the best way to do this. All right, so it's a good way for me to take a break also for a second. All right, so let's put on a nice song. Me.
מה השתנה הלילה הזה מכל הלילות, מכל הלילות, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים חמץ ומצה, חמץ ומצה. הלילה הזה כולו מצה, הלילה הזה כולו מצה. אחד מי יודע, אחד אני יודע, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 13 מי יודע, 13 אני יודע, 13 מידיה, 12 שבטיה, 11 כוכביה, 10 דבריה, 9 יחלדה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתה, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, אלא שבכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, אלא שבכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם, והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם. די דיינו, די דיינו, די דיינו, 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 די דיינו, די דיינו, די דיינו, 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 די דיינו, די דיינו, די דיינו, 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 די דיינו, די דיינו, די דיינו, דיינו, דיינו. שמחה רבה, אביב הגיע, פסח בא, שמחה רבה, אביב הגיע, פסח בא. תפרו, תפרו, תפרו לי בגדים, כיסים מילאו, מילאו, מילאו כיסי באגוזים. שמחה רבה, אביב הגיע, פסח בא, שמחה רבה, אביב הגיע, פסח בא. שאול אשאל 4 קושיות שתו 4 כוסות. שמחה רבה, אביב הגיע, פסח בא, שמחה רבה, אביב הגיע, פסח בא. וכוס גדולה
Okay, we're back. Okay, so Ariella and Ben ask a very interesting question. It's interesting that for 40 years Israel did not keep the laws of circumcision. So does this mean that they didn't keep Passover either during this time? That's actually a very fascinating question. We do have in the Torah explicitly stated that in the 15th day or in the 14th day of the second year in the desert, they brought the Passover offering. But other than that, to the best of my recollection, it does not mention anywhere else explicitly bringing the Passover offering. But if you hold on to that question, then maybe at the end, we could take a little bit of a deeper look at that. At any rate, I did find the verse I was looking for. It's near Jeremiah 16:9, which for some reason I always remember in my head. It's Jeremiah 16:14. But let's start in, we'll just start here in verse 10. So we're in Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 10. Okay. And let's make sure everyone can see me. Okay. So it says, verse 10, V'hayat ki tagid la'am hazeh et kol הדברים האלה ואמרו אליך על מה דיבר יהוה אלינו את כל הרעה הגדולה הזאת ומעווננו ומחטאתנו אשר חטאנו ליהוה אלוהינו. So it shall be when these people say to you, when this people says to you, all of these things, all of what things? All the things that were said earlier in the previous verses. Because of why did Yahweh speak to us? Regarding all of this great evil or these great punishments that he's going to do. What is our evil or what is our iniquity? And what are our sins that we sinned to Yahweh our God? In other words, why the people are going to say, why is God bringing all of these horrible things upon us? Okay, and those horrible things are described earlier in the verses earlier in this chapter of Jeremiah. Okay, verse 11. I'll just read. I won't do the biblical Hebrew accent here. I'll just because I'm going to rush through it. You shall say to them, it is because your fathers left me or abandoned me. Ne'um Yahweh, declares Yahweh. Yelchu acharei Elohim acharim, and they went after other gods. V'yavdu v'yishtachavu lehem, and they worshiped them or they served them and bowed down or prostrated before them. V'oti azavu, but me they abandoned. Ve'et torati lo shamaru, and they did not keep my Torah or keep my instructions. Okay. Verse 12, Atem here otam la'asot me'avotechem. And you, this is Jeremiah speaking to his generation, and you, hare otam la'asot me'avotechem, you did even more evil than your fathers. Okay? Your fathers left me, but you, this generation, you've done even more work, you've done even worse than your fathers. Okay? V'hinchem olchim ish acharei shrirut libo, and behold, each person is going after the strength or the stubbornness of his own heart. Okay? Hara, the stubbornness of his own evil heart. Lebilti shimoa elai, and to not listen to me and not listening to me. Okay? Okay. Oops. And I will cast you out from this land, al haaretz asher lo yadatem, to a land that you do not know. Atem va'avotechem, you and your fathers, meaning you and your fathers do not know this land that I'll cast you out to. V'vadatem sham et Elohim acharim, and there you shall worship other gods, yomam v'layla, day and night, asher lo eten lachem chanina, which will not give you any kind of mercy, any kind of favor. Okay, so basically, Jeremiah is saying to his generation, you guys are your fathers. Your ancestors were evil, but you're even more evil than them, and therefore I'm going to throw you out of this land, right? Speaking, of course, to Judea, right? Jeremiah left with the Judean exile to Babylon, and I'm going to throw you out of this land, and you're going to go to a land that you don't know, and you're going to worship gods that you don't know. Okay, and they will have no mercy on you, just as I wanted to have mercy on you, and I have had mercy on you all of these years, these decades, these centuries. Okay, not throwing you out yet, but now I'm going to do it. Okay, but of course, as we see many times in the prophets, that an admonition is often followed by some news of hope in the future. We have here in verse 14, behold, therefore, behold, days are coming, ne'um Yahweh, declares Yahweh, velo ye'amer od, and it shall not be said anymore, Hi Yahweh, as Yahweh lives, asher he'la et bnei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. As God lives, who brought the children up out of the land of Egypt. Verse 15. Verse 15. Ki im Hi Yahweh asher he'la et bnei Yisrael me'eretz Safon, ומכל הארצות אשר הדיחם שמה והשיב אותם על אדמתם אשר נתתי לאבותם. But rather, as Yahweh lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the lands of the north, and from all the lands to Asher Idicham Shama, which he had banished them to, or which he had banished them, Shivotim al admatam, and he returned them to their land, Asher Natati la'avotam, that he had given to their fathers. Okay, so these verses are, let's just summarize here. Verse 14 is saying, days will come in which it will no longer be said, as God lives, who performed the Exodus, who brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, but it will be said, as God lives, who brought the children of Israel back from the lands that he banished them to. Okay, that's an amazing thing, right? We saw in Exodus 13, right, specifically in Exodus 13:3, we saw the incredible importance, and we know from the many verses in the Torah, the incredible importance, the centrality of remembering the Exodus from Egypt. And Jeremiah is telling us here that in the future, we're not going to remember Yahweh for the Exodus from Egypt. We're going to remember him for ingathering of the exiles from the lands of the north and the south and the east of the west, right? So that is an amazing thing, that what God is going to do for us in the future is going to be so overwhelming, or is going to be so amazing, that it's actually going to shadow what he did for us in the past. And more than that, it's going to shadow the main event that formed the foundation of the relationship for 3,000 years between Yahweh and the children of Israel. And that is the Exodus from Egypt. That is the foundational event in establishing the relationship between the children of Israel and the God of Israel, and Yahweh, right? And it's so foundational that we have this holiday every year to commemorate it. We have the Passover offering, followed by the 7 days of Chag HaMazoth. But in the future, these verses imply that God is not even going to be remembered for that anymore. He's going to be remembered for doing something greater, which is the ingathering of the exiles from the four corners of the earth. Okay? And that's an amazing thing. And these verses therefore imply that Passover will not be remembered in the future, will not be kept in the future, that it will be replaced, perhaps, I don't know exactly how God plans to carry these verses out, but that very possibly that we will no longer remember Yahweh, or the main event that we'll remember regarding Yahweh's action towards us will not be the Exodus of Egypt, but will be the ingathering of the exiles, which we have already begun to see in the past 150 years or so. The land of Israel has gone from having approximately, I think it was 50,000 Jews total in 1850 or so, to over 6 million Jews today, right? So, and this, anyone who knows and who sees it knows what an amazing event this is. This is biblical. This is an event of biblical proportions happening right before our eyes, right? the miracle of 1948, the miracle of 1967, right? It's all been all downhill since then, pretty much. But hopefully we'll get our bearings straight again, and there'll be more miracles. Okay, but this is now seems to be that the ingathering of the exiles, according to these verses in Jeremiah 16, are going to be the event that's remembered in the future as the main event that establishes the relationship between Yahweh, the God of Israel, and the people of Israel. Okay? Any questions, any comments about this one? Anybody? No? And there'd be a lot more to say about this. I'll say one more thing, right? That God is the Elohim Chaim. He's a living God. He's constantly doing new things, right? He's not static, right? In the time of Abraham, there was not yet a Moshe. There was not yet a descent of the children of Jacob to Egypt, right? There was not yet an Exodus. There was not yet a 10 plagues or a splitting of the sea or a giving of the Torah. All of these things came later, right? And God is constantly, he's not a static God who just stays static, right? Many traditional Jews read Rabbanites, although I think somewhere the rabbis do actually imply this, right? That in the future that Passover will no longer be kept. But nonetheless, your typical rabbinical Jew is so stuck on tradition that he can't realize that God is a living being. He's a living entity that is constantly doing new things, creating new things for us, and that we as the people of Israel and we as humanity are constantly evolving and new things are happening, right? So if you have that kind of mentality, then you're going to say, no, that's impossible. You know, our ancestors have been keeping Passover for the past 2,000 years. We can't give up the Passover. But that's an Elohim Metim. That's a dead God. This is an Elohim Chaim. This is a living God who's constantly doing new things for the world, in particular the children of Israel. And therefore, when you think of God as a living being, just like every day we wake up and we do something new, we create something new. If you think of God as a living entity, then there's no surprise at all that in the future that Passover is going to be disbanded or Passover is going to be discontinued. And instead, the main thing we're going to remember Yahweh for is the ingathering of the exiles from the Arba Kanfot Haaretz, from the four corners of the earth. And who knows? It's totally up to him. I guess he'll let us know what his will is. Maybe there'll be a new holiday established based on that, and we will no longer be celebrating bringing the Passover offering and the festival of unleavened bread. We'll have to wait and see. Okay? All right. Any questions, any comments regarding that? Anybody? No? Okay, so let's move on. So that was question number 4. Question number 5. Okay. So I think most Karaites know the answer to this one. Okay, did you know there is one group in Israel that still brings a Passover sacrifice each year, following the same laws as mentioned in the Torah? What is that group? Answer, anybody? Want to type it in? It's not the Karaites, right? It is, of course, the Samaritans, right? The Samaritans bring the Passover sacrifice each year. So a little bit about the Samaritans. I have great respect in many ways for the Samaritans. They keep a much more original version or understanding of the Torah, much less than the Karaites. They've been influenced by the rabbis, right? They've been influenced much less by the rabbis than the Egyptian Karaites have, and so I have a lot of respect for the Samaritans, but they are doing something in my eyes that is very wrong, and that is saying that the place that Yahweh has chosen to cause his name to dwell is Mount Gerizim. I strongly disagree with that. They discount the rest of the Torah. The rest of the Tanach. They keep only the 5 books of the Torah, and they basically discount all of the prophets, and they don't accept the kingdom the southern kingdom, or the tribe of Judah and Jerusalem, as the place that God has chosen, as is spoken about explicitly, beginning in the end of the book of First Samuel, and which was conquered by David, and the place where he chose that he conquered from the Jebusites, and that he decided to build his palace, and decided to build a house for Yahweh, which was then carried out by Solomon, right? All through prophecy, or at least through God coming to David through prophets, and coming to Solomon in a dream, and expressing that that he approved this, right? So the place that God has chosen, that Yahweh has chosen, is Jerusalem, not Mount Gerizim. And this is a big, big problem. As much as I have respect for the Samaritans, and as much as I have respect for the fact that they have not been sucked in by all of the rabbinical nonsense, they are doing something which is explicitly against the Torah, and that is bringing sacrifices in the place that Yahweh did not choose. And this is a big, big no-no. So I always have to point that out. There's the good side and the bad side to what the Samaritans are doing. However, that's not the question here. The question is just a factual question. They are bringing the Passover sacrifice each year. And let's see if we can find a video of them bringing the Passover sacrifice. Just give me a second here. Let's see what we can come up with. Samaritan Passover. Oh, maybe this one. Okay. All right, let me try to share the screen here. Stop screen. Present. Share screen. Okay. And let's see what we got.
It's 2:30 in the morning on Mount Gerizim. The Samaritan village appears to be asleep and desolate, but it's not. We begin to notice men dressed in white who resemble biblical figures, coming out of every alley, carrying their prayer mats. They are off to morning prayers. We followed them to the entrance of the synagogue. From outside, we can hear the devotional prayers, as if listening to a voice from the past, a survivor from another era, a voice that has not succumbed to globalization. Eerie or mystical, depending on who you ask. These devotional mantras have been recited by the Samaritans for over 2,000 years, in Samaritan Hebrew, Samaritan Aramaic, and Samaritan Arabic. At 4:30 a.m., the prayers are over, and the Samaritans leave the synagogue, heading to the first holy stop of Mount Gerizim, the center of the world for the Samaritans. Walking in the dark through ancient rocky paths, the first station is the place of the 12 stones mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 4. The ritual begins and the scrolls are lifted for the first time. The second stop is at the break of dawn, the altar of Adam and his son Seth, where Adam blessed his son prior to his death. As morning breaks, the Samaritans head to the site of the everlasting hill, mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 15. The sparkling of the Torah scrolls to the rays of the sun at sunrise, with a pastoral view of the mountains in the background. This is the site where, according to Samaritan belief, Abraham saw the ram in the thicket when he was about to sacrifice his son Isaac. God will provide. Genesis chapter 28, verse 8. Next stop is the site of the altar of Isaac, equivalent of Mount Moriah for the Jews. The Samaritans then continued to the altar of Noah. For the Samaritans, Mount Gerizim was the resting place of Noah's Ark, and not Mount Ararat, the widely accepted belief by Christians. It's then time for the final stop, entering the everlasting hill, a site marked in the past by two monuments to Jacob. The Samaritans dedicate their prayers to the Exodus from Egypt and to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They then walk in circles 7 times, greet and hug each other as they have been doing for over 3,000 years, according to their beliefs, against all odds. Daniel Campos, I-24 News.
Okay, so that actually was not the Samaritan Passover sacrifice. So let's see if we can find one that is the Samaritan Passover sacrifice. Samaritan Passover in Israel, ritual, it's a modern comeback. Let's try this one. Let's see here. No, this is not the Samaritans. This is at the Kotel, Samaritan Passover in Israel. Okay, let's try this one.
Shalom from Jerusalem. Below me is the Temple Mount, the place where for hundreds of years the Israelites, the Jewish people, made sacrifices in their temple, living sacrifices in the case of lambs and goats and sheep and even pigeons. Well, this ancient need to wash away one's sins by sacrificing a living animal is still continued today here in Israel by a very unusual group. It's the Samaritans, who live about 50 miles to the north of Jerusalem in the area of ancient Samaria. The Samaritan community live around Mount Gerizim, the Mount of Blessings. Mount Gerizim has been the site of these ritual sacrifices for perhaps 2,500 years. Each year at Passover time, the Samaritans gather in their village known as Lutzah to sacrifice the animals in a ritual chanting of the Old Testament Torah and remembrance of the story of the Passover in Egypt. What you're seeing here actually carries on the ancient tradition of the temple sacrifice. The patriarch of each family will gather some of the blood from these animals which have been sacrificed and carry it on a branch of hyssop to their local houses. And there they will daub over the lintel of the house. You might assume this is a very solemn ceremony, and in many ways it is because it's led by the high priest of the Samaritans. But there's also an element of joy about this. In fact, you'll see many of the people daubing the blood of these sacrificed animals on their foreheads as a sign that their sins have been washed away for another year. There's much rejoicing in the Samaritan village. This is a dramatic illustration of the need that God has to have an atonement for sin, and that he has done this through the shedding of the blood of his only son, Jesus Christ. It's a remarkable witness for Christians and Jews in the Holy Land.
Okay, forget about the Jesus Christ. All right, well, obviously that guy's a Christian, so forget him. But nonetheless, okay, hold on. I just want to mark that. We'll try to look for another one because that's not going to go over very well in the Orthodox synagogue tomorrow. Well, maybe I'll just stop it right before the end of the video. But let me mark that video down for myself. Just give me 1 second here, please. 1 second, please. And let me just check that I have it correct. Give me 1 second. Yeah.
Shalom from
All right.
Jerusalem.
See if we can find one more.
Shalom from Jerusalem.
Get back here. Why is it doing this? Let's try this again. Okay, Samaritan Passover, Samaria 2010. That one's a little bit long. Passover sacrifice service in Israel. Samaritan's Passover. Okay. Yeah, that one's good. Let me just try one or two more. This one's 24 minutes. We don't want that one. Let's try this one. Passover sacrifice service in Israel. See how this one goes. Graphic images that may not. Okay, I guess we're going to see animals killed, which I don't like.
Mount Gerizim in Israel is regarded as a holy mountain among the Samaritan Jews. Having been rejected by the Jewish people after the Assyrian captivity for intermarrying and mixing relations with pagan people, the Samaritans were regarded as half-Jews and were seen as being unfit to worship and offer sacrifices at the temple in Jerusalem. Because of their inability to offer sacrifices in Jerusalem, they built their own temple on Mount Gerizim, where the remaining 800 Samaritans carry out sacrifices to this day. I was fortunate to be able to witness such an interesting ceremony over Passover week in Israel. The scene is uncomfortable for the sojourner not acquainted with Middle Eastern rituals and ways of life. However, one is able to understand the desperation for removal of sins these people must feel. Sacrifices are meant to be a gruesome reminder of one's depravity, laying hands upon an innocent animal for the shedding of blood to pay for one's iniquity. For thousands of years, this has been the way of life for many people, continuing even to this day. Sacrifice is essential. Something or someone must pay for the wrongs man has committed against God. As I watched the Samaritan sacrificial ceremony, all that I could think of was Jesus' treatment
Oh,
in
here we go to
the
Jesus.
adulterous Samaritan woman in John chapter.
Okay, enough. All right, these are all Christians. Okay, so let's see here. Well, it's good up until 3 minutes. Let me copy this one down as well. I'll just have to stop it at 3 minutes. Oy. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. Okay, that's good. Let's see if there's any other one that I want to mark down here. Samaritan Passover in Israel, Samaritan sacrifice, Samaritan. This one is how long? Is 1 minute and 20. The millennial whole of Israel, Samaritan Passover. Let's do one more. Let's try this one. Let me copy this one as well. This is 1 minute and 27 seconds. Let's try this one. All right, that one doesn't really explain much. All right, I think those are pretty good, those two. How long is this one? 39 minutes. That's a bit too long. All right, I just want to grab the URL for this one, so just give me a second here. One second, please. Oops. Let me just check that. All right. So I think I have a couple of videos that I found, which I can show the Orthodox Jews tomorrow. Well, they're not really all Orthodox Jews. It's an Orthodox congregation, but they're Jews of all types. All right. Let me just see this one. All right. Good. Okay. Cool. All right. So there we go. The Samaritans. David and Ruth are back. All right, guys. Any questions, any comments on that? I think that's pretty clear. The volume is low. All right. I don't know how to change that. You can't hear me okay? Ben and Ariella? Now you can hear me okay. Okay. All righty. All right. So that's the Samaritans. Let's reshare the screen. There we go. And now we can go on to question number 6. And let's post it. Okay, what does the barley harvest in the land of Israel have to do with the Passover? Well, I think as Karaites, we all know this one, but I'm going to go through it anyway. Okay, so let's see. Where do we start? I think we should start in Exodus. -12. Maybe let me just do a search for the word aviv to see if I want to start anywhere else. Yeah, I want to focus on the word aviv. So let's go to 9. It's 33. Aviv. Okay, cool. There we go. Alrighty, so Exodus 13. Maybe this time instead of going back to our good old Exodus 13, let's go to Exodus 23. So go to Exodus 23:15, or we'll just go over the description of the Passover in Exodus 23. So Exodus 23 is has a number of different things, but then when we get to 15, oh, wait a second. Maybe I don't want to do Exodus. So חודש אביב, עשית פסח, 16:1, בחודש אביב הוצאת. Maybe let's go to Deuteronomy 16 for a change. All right, let's go to Deuteronomy 16. All right. Cool. All right, so Deuteronomy 16. Okay. So, verse 1, Shamor et Chodesh HaAviv, ועשית פסח ליהוה אלוהיך, כי בחודש האביב הוציאך יהוה אלוהיך ממצרים לילה. Okay? So keep the month of the Aviv. Okay? And actually, one second here. Maybe we should start back in Exodus 13:4. Let's go back for a second to Exodus 13:4. Okay, so Exodus 13:4. We read through most of these verses before, so we're just going to focus on 13:4. Okay, Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh haviv. Okay, today you are going out of Egypt in the month of the Aviv. Okay, and the focus here is, of course, on the Aviv. Let me just mark this down. Exodus 13:4. One second, please. Okay, Exodus 13:4. Right, so we're going out in the month of the Aviv. Of course, we know that Aviv in modern Hebrew means springtime, but we can also get a much more technical definition for it, as we all as Karaites know. Okay, so now let's go over to Exodus 23, the HaMo'ed Hag Aviv. Let me just see what this one adds anything. Oops, anything else that I'd like to add? One second. 23:15. שלוש רגלים תחוג לי בשנה, את חג המצות תשמור 7 ימים, תאכל מצות כאשר ציוויתיך למועד חודש האביב, כי בעוד יצאת ממצרים ולא יראה פן. Okay, that is fine, but that's not what I want to focus on. אביב, יצאת ממצרים, לויטיקוס, ביקורים ליהוה אביב כלוי באש. That one maybe I could point out. Deuteronomy 16:1. So now let's go to 16:1. Deuteronomy 16:1. And we'll read through a couple of these verses. Okay. So, verse 1, Shamor et Chodesh Aviv. So keep the month of the Aviv. What does it mean, keep the month of the Aviv? It means, as we saw in Exodus 13:4, Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh Aviv, right? You're going out in the month of the Aviv, okay? Avodah Zot b'chodesh hazeh, right? Really, it clarifies it in verse 5. So let's read Exodus 13:5. V'haya ki yaviacha Yahweh el eretz haKenaani. So it shall be when Yahweh brings you to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, the Asher nishba lavotecha, which he swore to your fathers, latet lach eretz avat chalav u'dvash, to give you a land flowing with milk and honey. V'avadeta et avodah azot, that you shall serve the service, or you shall keep the service b'chodesh hazeh, in this month, right? So that's what it means when we're talking about keeping the chodesh of the Aviv. It means that the Passover offering and Chag HaMatzot fall out in Chodesh Aviv. So it's really speaking about keeping the Passover, bringing the Passover offering, and keeping the Chag and keeping the festival of unleavened bread in the Chodesh Aviv, in the month of the Aviv. So let me just modify this for 1 second. 13:4-5, and then Deuteronomy 16:1. Okay. So now we'll go back to Deuteronomy 16. So Shemor et Chodesh Aviv. So keep the month of the Aviv. Okay. What does that mean? The Passover sacrifice, the festival of unleavened bread, falls out in the month of the Aviv. That's what it means by keep the month of the Aviv. Vasita Pesach liYahweh Elohecha, and do the Passover offering to Yahweh your God. Ki b'chodesh Aviv, because in the month of the Aviv, Hotziacha Yahweh Elohecha miMitzrayim laila. Because in the month of the Aviv, Yahweh took you out of Egypt at night. Okay, or actually, one second. Yeah, okay, fine. Verse 2. וזבחת פסח ליהוה אלוהיך צאן ובקר במקום אשר יבחר יהוה לשכן שמו שם. And you shall sacrifice the Passover to Yahweh, your God, from the flock or from the herd in the place which Yahweh shall choose to make his name dwell there. Okay? Lo tochal alav chametz, do not eat with it leavened bread. Shivat yamim tochal alav matzot. For 7 days you shall eat with it matzot. Meaning, right after you bring the Passover sacrifice, then for 7 days you're only allowed to eat matzot. Lechem oni, the bread of poverty or the bread of affliction. Ki b'chipazon yatzata me'eretz Mitzrayim, because in hurriedly or quickly or hurriedly you went out of the land of Egypt. L'ma'an tiskoret yom tzitcha me'eretz Mitzrayim. In order that you should remember the day of your going out of the land of Egypt for all of your days. Okay, that's why we bring the Passover sacrifice and eat the matzah. And there shall be no leavening agent should be seen in all of your borders. Shivat yamim for 7 days. And you should not allow to sit the flesh or the meat which you shall slaughter in the evening biyom rishon baboker, on the first day until the morning. In other words, what we saw before in Exodus 12, okay, the Passover sacrifice is not allowed to stay until the morning. Anything that's left over at that point is to be destroyed. Lo tuchal lizbach et hapesach be'echad sha'arecha asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lach. You will not slaughter the Passover in one of your gates, meaning in your local, back at your homes, in your local cities, asher Yahweh Elohecha noten lach, which Yahweh your God gives you. Verse 6, Ki im el hamakom asher yivcha Yahweh Elohecha lishachen shemo sham, but in the place which Yahweh shall choose to make his name dwell, lishachen shemo sham, make his name dwell there, tizbach et hapesach be'erev kavo shemesh mo'ed tzitcha miMitzrayim. In the evening, when the sun sets, at the time of your going out of Egypt. Again, that's on the 14th day, after sunset on the 14th day, meaning at the very beginning of the 15th day. Okay? Bishalta v'achalta b'makom asher yichad Yahweh Elohecha bo v'panita baboker v'alachta le'olecha. And you shall cook it and eat it in the place which Yahweh your God shall choose. Upanita baboker v'alachta le'olecha. And you shall turn away in the morning and go back to your tents, to your houses. Sheshet yamim tochal matzot biyom hashvi'i atzeret leYahweh Elohecha lo ta'aseh melacha. For 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day is in atzeret, basically a holiday, one last day of the festival, to Yahweh your God lo ta'aseh melacha. You shall not do any melacha. Okay. All right. Very good. So, but the point here is shemor et chodesh aviv vasita pesach liYahweh Elohecha ki b'chodesh aviv hotziacha Yahweh Elohecha miMitzrayim laila. Okay. So we're to keep the month of the Aviv. Keeping the month of the Aviv means bringing the Passover offering and following it by 7 days of eating unleavened bread or refraining from eating leavened bread. That's how we keep the Chodesh of the Aviv. That's what is meant by keeping the Chodesh of the Aviv. Okay. Now, of course, we need to define what this word Aviv is. We Karaites are pretty familiar with this, but we're going to go through it anyway. So in order to do that, we are now going to go to Exodus 9:31. And let me just mark this down. Okay, so Exodus 9:31. So this is the 10 plagues. We get to the plague of hail. Let's pick it up in verse 27. So this is the plague of hail. This is the sixth plague. I'm sorry, the seventh plague. Hail. וישלח פרעה ויקרא למשה ולאהרון. So Pharaoh sent and called for Moshe and Aaron. ויאמר עליהם חטאתי הפעם. And he said to them, Pharaoh said to Moshe and Aaron, I've sinned this time. Okay, now I know I've sinned. Yahweh HaTzadik ve'ani ve'ami harishaim. Yahweh is the righteous one, and I and my people are the unrighteous ones, are the evil ones. Verse 28. Hetiru el Yahweh. Maybe we don't need to go through all these verses. No, let's just go straight to let's just go straight to 31. Actually, just 31 and 32. So let me just mark this down for myself. This is Exodus 9:31 through 32. Okay. So this is the plague of hail, and this is now describing what happened to the various plants during the plague of hail, as we all know as Karaites. So the flax and the barley were struck down. Ki haseora aviv wahapishta givol, because the barley was aviv. Okay, what does aviv mean? Aviv is usually translated as in the boot. That's a very typical translation. We'll look at an English translation in a second. But what it really means, as we as Karaites pretty much know by this point, is it means that the barley has already grown out of the grass stage. The stalk has extended. The seeds have begun to fill in the stalks, and it's almost to the point of ripeness. Okay, and therefore, when the hail came down, that stalk was brittle enough that the hail was able to knock it off and destroy it. And the same with the pishta begivol. Givol is in the bud, they usually translate it as. Okay, so seorah aviv, pishta givol. Okay, the seorah, the barley was in the boot, and the flax was in the bud, is the way they usually translate it as. But what it really means is the barley was in a late enough stage of ripeness that the barley stalks had extended, the seeds were ripening, were hardening up, and therefore when the hail came, it was able to destroy them, to knock them off and destroy them, and the same with the flax. Okay? However, v'achita kusemeth lo nuku ki afelot hena. But the wheat and the spelt were not destroyed, were not smitten, were not struck down. Ki afelot hena, literally because they were in the dark stage. Okay, but what does that mean? In order to understand what that means, we have to speak a little bit about the ripening stages of these wheat grasses, of the grasses from the wheat family. Okay, so let's see. Do I want to go into this now? I think I'll just maybe not go into it in detail. Maybe I'll go into it. Let's see if we can find a video on. Let's see if they even have one on Aviv. Oh my God. Aviv barley now. Okay. We can try this one. Oops. Nah, we're gonna skip that. 1 second here. This one is how long? 10 minutes. I'll have to look for it later, but let me just see here. One more attempt. Barley ripening. Timing of the biblical year. Let's just try this one. This is how long? 1 minute. Okay, let's give this one a shot and see what happens. Okay. Nope, that's not gonna do it. It's already ripe. Let's see. Barley from grass to seed. I grow barley grass very easily. I grow barley grass at home. No, that's not it. All right, I'll have to find something a little bit later. Okay, no biggie. I'll just make a note for myself. Okay, so let me reshare the screen. Window, Torah, share. Right. So we see once again we were in Exodus 9:31. Okay. So I'll have to dig up some pictures for the talk tomorrow, but basically we see here that the flax and the barley were in enough of a stage of ripeness, were an advanced enough stage of ripeness, and that stage was called, for the barley, was called Aviv, okay? That the hail was able to strike them down, but the wheat and the spelt were not struck down because they were still in the dark stage or the grass stage. They were just grasses, basically. That shoot had not yet come up. Okay, so let's talk about one or two things here. Okay, this gets into the idea of the harvest seasons, or the cycle of harvests in Israel. Cycle of harvests. I'm just writing this down. Barley, wheat, summer fruits, etc. Okay. Right, and any of us who live in or have lived in the land of Israel know that the first grass to come up. So we have a bunch of plants that are all from the same family, right? Basically, the wheatgrass family. Let's just see here. Wikipedia. Right, so barley, let's just read this here. So barley, a member of the grass family, is a major cereal grain grown in temperate climates globally. It was one of the first cultivated grains, particularly in Eurasia as early as 10,000 years ago. Globally, 70% of barley production is used as animal fodder, while 30% as a source of fermentable material for beer and certain distilled beverages. And as a component of various foods, it is used in soups and stews and in barley bread of various cultures. Barley grains are commonly made into malt in a traditional and ancient method of preparation. In 2017, barley was ranked 4th among grains in quantity produced, etc., etc. Okay. 1 second. Wow, that's interesting. The word barn, which originally meant barley house, is also rooted in these words. Okay. I'll just read a little bit more. Barley is a member of the grass family. It is a self-pollinating diploid species with 14 chromosomes. The wild ancestor of domesticated barley is abundant in grasslands and woodlands throughout the Fertile Crescent area of Western Asia and Northwest Africa, and it is abundant in disturbed habitats, roadsides, and orchards. Outside this region, the wild barley is less common and it's usually found in disturbed habitats. However, in a study of genome-wide diversity markers, Tibet was found to be an additional center of domestication of cultivated barley. Okay. All right, and we don't need to go on to this. I'm just going to mark this down for myself. So what we want to point out here, just very briefly, is the agricultural cycle in Israel. Thank you, Mark. Very, very kind of you to say. Okay, so what we want to focus on here is the agricultural cycle in Israel, and as we know, if we live or have lived in the land of Israel, or actually in any of the surrounding areas, that the first of the grass family, right? I'll call it the wheatgrass family. But the first of the grass family to come out. So there are 5 major grains that are part of the grass family. It's barley, wheat, spelt, rye, and oats. Okay, these are all the major, or the 5 major species. I guess they're each individual species of the grass family. Okay, and if you look in the land of Israel and the surrounding lands, you'll see that the first grass to come out of the ground, or the first member of this family to come out of the ground, is barley. Okay, and if you look around the land of Israel, you could probably already see it in January. You'll start seeing the barley grasses start appearing, and then they're going to slowly shoot out or extend their shoots and slowly ripen. Okay, but the barley is what ripens first in the land of Israel. Then after that, about 1 to 2 months later, then we have the wheat grasses become ripe, and you can see that again. If you live in Israel, you'll see that the barley is ripening usually around beginning of March or so, around March 1st, and then wheat is going to be about a month and a half later. Then you're going to have some of the earlier fruits that'll start to ripen in, let's say, June or July, and that'll be the grapes. The figs tend to ripen early, and then you're going to have the harvest fruits. Okay, so the harvest fruits are going to be pomegranate. Date is usually ripe around August or so we can include that maybe with the summer fruits. So let's say summer fruits are figs, grapes, and maybe dates. And then in the harvest season, you're going to get pomegranate, you're going to get olive, and I think I covered all the 7 fruits, right? Didn't I? Barley, wheat, figs, dates, grapes, pomegranates, olives. That covers all the 7 fruits. And the olives are going to be last, right? They're usually harvested in like October or November. The pomegranates, usually September, around then. And so those are the fall fruits. And of course, there are many other fruits that grow that would be considered fall fruits, such as apples, pears, etc. Okay, so that is basically the agricultural season. So we know that the first grass to ripen is barley. It ripens usually in around March-ish. We'll say around March, right? This year, Passover started on April. For us, it started on April 6th, was it? I think April 6th. And Aviv barley had already been found, not around Jerusalem, but in the southern extremities or in the southern regions of the land of Israel. Okay, so what are we trying to say here? We're trying to say that Passover is associated with the barley harvest. In fact, what Passover really is it is a holiday that is it's a first fruits holiday. Just as Shavuot is a first fruits holiday, it's a holiday that's celebrating the harvest of the barley, which is the first grass, which is basically the first major crop to ripen in the land of Israel. So let me just find something here. I just want to look up Torah. Let's see if there are any verses I want to focus on with that. This is 931. Zera chomef seorim b'chamisha shekel. No. But kemach seorim lo yitzak. V'ani eretz chita sora. Okay. Judges lechem seorim ma'achnek. Well, really, I guess what I want to look up is the Omer offering. So let's go for a second to Leviticus 23. Oops. Hebrew. One second. בחודש הראשון, ב14 לחודש בין 40. קרבת מישרים, ידבר בני ישראל אמרת ותבוא אל הארץ אשר ניתנה לקצירה, הבאתם את עומר ראשית קצירכם. Okay, so here we go. This is Omer offering is starting in Leviticus 23:9. I'm just going to mark this down for myself. Okay, so we see that the Omer offering, which the rabbis say begins on the day after the first day of Passover, and which the Karaites usually understand to mean on the Sunday that occurs within the 7 days of Passover, because it says Mimacharat HaShabbat. Okay, so let's read about that very briefly. So verse 9, V'daber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. So Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, verse 10, let me just make sure everyone can see correctly. Verse 10, Daber el bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel, Amata alehem, and say to them, Ki tavo el haaretz asher ani noten lachem, when you come into the land which I am giving to you, or I give to you, ukzatem et kitzira, and you harvest its harvest. Okay, litzor is to cut down, okay, to harvest, to reap, they translate it as here. Ve'vetem et omer reshit kitzirchem el kohen. You shall bring an omer. Okay, an omer is a sheaf. A sheaf is basically a bundle of grain stalks tied together. It's like a bunch of grain stalks, of grass stalks. Okay, reshit kitzirchem el kohen. You shall bring an omer of the first fruits, the first of your harvest, to the kohen. Okay, verse 11. V'henif et ha'omer lifnei Yahweh liritzonchem, and you shall lift up or wave for Yahweh liritzonchem, so that you may be accepted. Mimacharat Shabbat, on the day after the Shabbat, yanifu a kohen. On the day after the Shabbat, the kohen shall wave it. Okay, so this is called the Omer offering, or in English, the wave sheaf offering, because we're taking a sheaf, a bundle of the first fruits of the harvest, and waving it. Okay. ועשיתם ביום הניפכם את העומר כבש תמים בין שנתו לעולה ליהוה. So you bring a sacrifice with that, and I think I'm just going to skip over this part. לחם כלוי וכרמל. Okay, verse 14, we'll just read. ולחם כלוי וכרמל לא תאכלו עד עצם היום הזה, עד הביאכם את קורבן אלוהיכם חוקת עולם לדורותיכם. As maybe you boil it or something like that. Basically, any of the first fruits, any of the fruits of the new agricultural season, lo tochlu, you shall not eat ad etzem hayom hazeh, until this very day. In other words, until you bring a first fruits offering to Yahweh, you're not allowed to eat the new produce of the land, which begins with the barley harvest in the month of the Aviv. Okay. Ad aviachem et korban Elohechem, until you bring the sacrifice to your God. Chukat olam ledorotechem, an eternal statute throughout your generations, b'chol moshvatechem, and throughout all of your habitations. Okay, so basically what this is saying is that we bring the Omer offering. Again, the rabbis believe this is on the second day of Passover. So if the 15th of the month, starts on a Tuesday night and ends on a Wednesday night. Then on Wednesday night into Thursday night, that's when we bring the Omer offering, basically Thursday during the day. The Karaites understand Mimacharat Shabbat that we see here. They understand the Shabbat as meaning the Sabbath day, and therefore Mimacharat Shabbat, the day after the Shabbat, is a Sunday. Okay, and that's when the Omer offering is brought, even though it doesn't say so explicitly, and that is a problem, I'll admit, and therefore this is not 100% clear. But the Karaites have generally understood this to be the Sunday that falls within Chag HaMazoth. Chag HaMazoth is 7 days, so there's going to be one and only one day of each week within Chag HaMazoth, and there'll be one and only one Sunday, and this would be the Mimacharat Shabbat. This would be the day after the Shabbat. And this would be the day when the Karaites believe that the Passover, that the Omer offering is brought. The point being that this is the first fruits of the entire agricultural season. We know that just from experience in the land of Israel, we know, and we also saw in Exodus 9:31 that the barley was already in an advanced enough stage that it was destroyed by the hail. The wheat was still in a grassy form, in the grass stage. And so it was not destroyed by the hail. And so this, and just experience in the land of Israel and surrounding lands, we know that this first fruits must be referring to the barley harvest because it's the barley that ripens first. Okay, and I'll talk about this just a little bit more. I'll show something else to prove this, but that's basically what is going on. Okay, so let's talk just for a second about Shavuot. And let me just see if one of the verses I'm looking for here. Okay. So how do we know that's referring to the barley harvest and not the wheat harvest? Okay, but I don't want to look at the verses here. Give me 1 second. I can remember where the other verses are. And I think we'll do this just by going to Shavuot. Oops. Names, biblical names, Deuteronomy 16:10. So I think that's what I'm. Let's go to Deuteronomy 16 again. One second. חמש בכמה תחספון שבעה שבועות אשר במקום אשר יבחר אלוהיך לשכן שמזרת את עבד הייתי. No, that's not the verses I'm looking for. Very important verses, as they all are, but those are not the ones I'm actually looking for. Where did my Wikipedia go? No. Over here. So it's not Exodus 23. Let's try Numbers 28. And that is Numbers 28:26. 28:26. 1 second. I guess this does it. Okay, I guess actually the Deuteronomy also explains it. I was looking for the word specifically chita. Let me just 1 second here. Just bear with me for 1 second. Let's look for it this way. Let's do it this way. One second, please. Next is Chita, B'Shem Esolet Chitim, Exodus Nui Eretz Chita. No, Deuteronomy 32 Chelo Chalayot Chita V'Dam. Okay, so it's not. Okay, so it actually calls it Solet, not Okay, so we can then go to second here. One second. Okay, good enough. So Leviticus 15, 17. I have to mark that down as well. Leviticus 23, 17, Shavuot. Okay, just give me 1 second here. I'm sorry. Solet, flour. No, I want to see where the 2 loaves. It speaks specifically about 2 loaves. That's what I'm looking for. 1 second. One second. 9, 2 loaves. That's what I'm looking for. 23:17. Leviticus 23:17. Okay. All right, I guess this is it. So Leviticus 23:17. Okay. So let's pick it up here. Okay. So we are in Leviticus 23:15. We're speaking about Shavuot. Okay. So usfartem lechem mimacharat haShabbat miyom haviachem et omer tnufa sheva shabbatot mimot tiena. So you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Shabbat, which we Karaites interpret as Sunday. Miyom haviachem et omer tnufa, from the day of your bringing the wave sheaf offering. In other words, that first fruits of the barley harvest. Sheva Shabbatot tmimot tiena. It shall be 7 full Shabbats, 7 complete Shabbats. Okay. Ad mimacharat Shabbat shvi'it, until the day after the 7th Shabbat. Tisbaru chamishim yom. You will have counted 50 days. V'kraftem mincha chadasha liYahweh, and you shall bring a new grain offering to Yahweh. Verse 17. Mimoshvotechem taviu lechem tnufa. From your habitations you shall bring a bread wave offering. Okay. Shtayim, 2, meaning 2 loaves. Shnei esronim, 2 loaves, which consists of 2 esronim. And an esronim is 1/10 of an ephah of solet. Solet is fine flour. Okay, and this implies wheat flour. Ti'ena chametz, it shall be chametz, leavened bread, te'afena bikurim leYahweh, and you shall bake it as a first fruits to Yahweh. Okay, and then it goes on to talk about the sacrifices that go with those 2 loaves. Okay, so that is Shavuot, and the point being that okay, we bring the Omer offering, represents the first fruits of the entire agricultural season. That's the barley harvest. Okay, then we count 49 days, 7 full Shabbats. The 50th day, the day after that, which is a Sunday according to the Karaites, we bring a new offering, a new grain offering, which is 2 loaves of fine flour. And fine flour always implies wheat flour. Solet is wheat flour. Okay, so it's 2 loaves of baked fine flour, of high quality flour, top quality flour, baked into loaves of bread, and that is brought as a bikurim, as a first fruits offering to Yahweh. In other words, Shavuot represents the first fruits of the wheat harvest, which occurs 50 days after we bring the first fruits of the barley harvest. Actually, we're counting inclusively. So really, it's the 49 days after the bringing of the first fruits of the barley harvest. All right, and that makes perfect sense based on the agricultural season in Israel, because we know from experience that the wheat is going to ripen about a month and a half after the barley. Anyone who lives in Israel knows that. Okay, so what do we have here? We have that Passover, specifically the Omer offering, is associated with the first fruits of the entire agricultural season, which basically means, again, we're bringing a sheaf of our harvest. It doesn't specifically say barley, but barley is the earliest ripening grass, so it must be barley. Okay, so we bring a sheaf of barley, we wave it. That's the Omer offering. That's Tnufat Omer, the wave sheaf offering, on the Sunday that occurs in Passover, according to the Karaites. 49 days later, on 7 weeks later, exactly. Okay, on another Sunday, then we bring 2 loaves, 2 baked loaves of leavened wheat bread as a first fruits offering again, and that is explicitly from wheat. That's Shavuot, Pentecost in English. That is the Shavuot holiday, and that proves that the Shavuot is associated with the wheat harvest, and by logic and just by common sense, it shows that the Omer offering and Passover therefore are associated with the first harvest, which is the barley harvest. Okay. All right. So that is that. So just to point things out for people who are kind of new to Karaism, the Shavuot, Pentecost, has absolutely nothing to do with the giving of the Torah. It's really an extrapolation, and a poor extrapolation, if you ask me, that the rabbis come up with the idea that it has to do with the giving of the Torah. Yes, it's true that you might be able to say that the giving of the Torah occurred more or less around the time that Shavuot would later be instituted in the year. In other words, the Israelites arrive at Mount Sinai on the first day of the 3rd month, and then it says 3 days later is when God speaks to Israel. No, it doesn't say that. It says that they prepared for 3 days for God to speak to Israel, but then you have an intervening story of Jethro arriving and telling Moshe that he should appoint assistant judges, and so it's not clear at all. So this whole idea of the rabbis establishing Shavuot as the Chag Matan Torah, the festival of the giving of the Torah, has absolutely nothing to do with the Torah whatsoever. It's a complete invention out of their minds, and Shavuot has to do with the first fruits of the wheat harvest, which occurs about a month and a half after the first fruits of the barley harvest, which is commemorated, or which is officiated, what's the word I'm looking for, which is initiated by the bringing of the Omer offering, which occurs according to Karaite understanding, which again is, I can talk about this a lot, not 100% clear, but the Karaites usually understand this to be on the Sunday that occurs within Passover. Okay, so to make a long story short, Passover is the barley harvest, Shavuot is the wheat harvest, Sukkot is the final harvest, right? The final fruits, the fall fruits, which again we said are basically going to be the pomegranates and the olives and any other fall fruits that might have been grown, and that is the agricultural season. Okay, so to go back to our original question, was what does the barley harvest in the land of Israel have to do with Passover? It now becomes quite clear that the barley harvest, or that Passover, is associated with the first fruits of the agricultural season through the Omer offering. Okay, and the Omer offering is, and that first fruits must be the barley harvest. We also see that in Exodus 9:31 that in the plague of hail, that it is mentioned that the barley was aviv, and so it was struck down. The barley was an advanced stage of ripeness, so it was struck down, whereas the wheat was not in an advanced stage of ripeness, right? That was in Exodus 9:31. Let's go back to that for a second. (9:31 and 9:32), right? So the wheat and the spelt were afelot, were in the dark stage, meaning they were just grasses, right? They had not yet extended their stalks, and so they were not struck down. They were too flexible. They didn't have these stalks which could be struck down by the hail. This shows again that the barley, haseorah, ripens much earlier than the wheat. That's our experience in the land of Israel. We see that the Omer offering, which is associated with Passover, is a first fruits offering. That's a barley offering. We see that 50 days later, Shavuot explicitly says that we must bring 2 loaves of wheat flour. So so Shavuot is the holiday associated with the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Okay, so that answers that question. Any questions? Any comments regarding this? And here's David and Ruth back again. Any questions? Any comments regarding this?
Not the actual question, but something that might be related. I was
Tim.
taught that during Pesach, they had to keep the offerings going in the Beit HaMikdash. And you mentioned there was a bread offering, and there was a machloket that somebody didn't really answer in those rabbinic circles as to whether during Pesach they were unleavened or whether they were leavened as usual. Do we have anything from a Karaite perspective on that?
That was leavened or unleavened. The sacrifices that are brought during Passover?
There were loaves kept in the Beit HaMikdash.
Oh, you're talking about the showbread altar.
Yeah, the showbread. Yeah, the altar. Right. Were they leavened or were they unleavened during Pesach?
That's a good question. I never thought of that one before. I don't know. I don't think the Torah says. I honestly don't think the Torah says. I never actually thought of that one before. Who knows? Maybe they were unleavened. You know, the Beit HaMikdash always seems to have, or the tabernacle always seems to have different rules. You know, so maybe they were leavened. I mean, I never really thought about that before. All I could tell you is the Torah doesn't say anything explicit about that I know of. So it's whoever says whatever they say, it's going to be complete speculation.
Okay. Well, it was never resolved in the rabbinic circles, so.
And it never will be, because the Torah doesn't have anything to say about it. We'll have to wait. We'll have to wait for prophecy to come tell us, for God to come tell us what to do. I've actually never thought about that before. That's actually an interesting question. My chushat beten, my gut feeling is that it's going to be unleavened. But then again, there are specific laws for making that showbread, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's the machloket. Yeah,
maybe we saw. Right. It could go either way. I don't know. I don't have a question.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask God on that one. Excellent question. I'll have to think about that. I'll keep my eyes open to see if I can come across any answers. All right. So now we're going to get to our last question. And let me just see. Okay. So did the children of Israel stop celebrating Passover for many hundreds of years after entering the land of Israel? That's our last question. And then we're going to end the talk. Been a long talk. All right. And just give me a second. You know what? I'm going to put on another song. I need a break. So let me put on a song for about 5 minutes. And I'll get the verses ready. And then we will tackle our last question. We'll go back to Mimi.
Baby. שישו ושמחו בשמחת חג, מחאו כפיים, נגנו ושירו בקול חזק, ובמצלתיים, יד ביד, כולנו באחד, פה ושם נבוא.
Son of Azaliah, the son of Mishulam, to the temple of Yahweh. He said, go up to Chilkiah the high priest and have him get ready the money that has been brought into the temple of Yahweh, which the doorkeepers have collected from the people. Have them entrusted to the men appointed to supervise the work on the temple, and have these men pay the workers who repair the temple of the Lord, We can skip ahead a little bit. Okay. So Chidkiah, Shaphan, the son of Azaliah, is sent to Chidkiah, who is the high priest. And in verse 8, it says, Chidkiah, the high priest, said to Shaphan, the secretary, I have found the book of the law in the temple of Yahweh. So, okay, let's just read. He gave it to Shaphan, who read it. Then Shaphan, the secretary, went to the king and reported to him, your officials have paid out the money that was in the temple of Yahweh and have entrusted it to the workers and supervisors at the temple. Then Shaphan, the secretary, informed the king, Chidkiah, the priest, has given me a book. And Shaphan read from it in the presence of the king. So the Torah, the written Torah, had been lost. And if there were any oral Torah, for sure, maybe they were keeping some things, but without the written Torah, the oral Torah is not going to get very far, right? As we can see from the rabbis. Okay, so at any rate, the people had no idea, right, of this book of the law, of this book of the Torah. Okay, when the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his robes. He gave these orders to Chidkiah the priest, Hakham, son of Shaphan, etc., etc. Verse 13, go and inquire of Yahweh for me and for the people and for all of Judah about what is written in this book that has been found. So they find this written Torah, this 5 books of Moses, ostensibly, and it's like they have no idea what it is. The written Torah had been lost for God knows how long because the people had apostated. They'd become evil. The kings of Israel had become evil, and the kings of Judah had become evil, right? Great is Yahweh's anger that burns against us because those who have gone before us have not obeyed the words of this book. They have not acted in accordance with all that is written. They are concerning us. Okay. So we could skip ahead a little bit, but the story is amazing. Josiah is presented or is told by Chidkiah, the high priest, in the house of Yahweh. So they're somehow worshiping Yahweh, but they have no idea. They've lost the Torah. They've lost the written Torah. And Chidkiah has found, sitting in the Geniza somewhere, or in some storage room somewhere, he's found a book of the Torah. He's found the scroll of the Torah. And Josiah is told, okay? And then Josiah says this is 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 1. Then the king called together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. He went up to the temple of Yahweh with the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests and the prophets, all the people from the least to the greatest. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the temple of Yahweh. The king stood by the pillar and renewed the covenant in the presence of Yahweh to follow the Lord, to follow Yahweh and keep his commandments, statuses and decrees with all his hearts and all his soul, thus confirming the words of the covenant written in this book. Then all the people pledged themselves to the covenant. And we could skip ahead a little bit. So he goes ahead, he pulls down a bunch of pagan altars. And then we have here in 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 21. We have the king gave this order to all the people. Celebrate the Passover to Yahweh, your God. Maybe we'll switch over to the Hebrew here. Okay, so this is 2 Kings 23, 21. Let me go over to the Hebrew. Okay. ויצב המלך את כל העם לאמור עשו פסח ליהוה אלוהיכם ככתוב על ספר הברית הזה. So the King Josiah gave a commandment to all of the people, gave a command to all of the people, saying, עשו פסח ליהוה, do the Passover, which would imply again the Passover sacrifice, to Yahweh Elohechem, to Yahweh, your God, ככתוב על ספר הברית הזה, as it is written in this book, in this scroll of the covenant. Verse 22. כי לא נעשה כפסח הזה מימי השופטים אשר שפטו את ישראל וכל מימי מלכי ישראל ומלכי יהודה. Because, and let's translate here quite literally, because it was not done according to this Passover from the days of the judges who judged Israel and all the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. Okay? What was not done? The Passover sacrifice, the Passover, right? Passover and Chag HaMazoth, according to this verse, it might seem and possibly was the case, had not been done since the days of the judges. Okay, that would include the days of the judges, the days of all the kings, right? The period of the kings came after the period of the judges. It would seem, according to this verse, that Passover had not been celebrated, right? That the Passover offering had not been brought, and Chag HaMazoth had not been celebrated since the days of the judges. Okay. Ki im b'shmona esrei shana lemelech Yoshiyahu naseh Pesach hazeh liyahweh b'Yerushalayim. But in the 18th year of King Yoshiyahu, Josiah, Na'aseh Pesach hazeh, the Passover was done to Yahweh in Jerusalem. So that's an amazing thing. What these verses seem to be telling us, specifically verse 22 seems to be telling us, is that Passover had not been celebrated since the days of the judges. Okay? Well, does this 100% make sense, or is there another explanation? After all, we do know that there were some very, very good judges, right? I mean, most of the judges were good, right? Shmuel, who was the last judge, and who lived in the there was no Beit HaMikdash then, but lived in the tabernacle, right? We would assume that he certainly would have had the nation bring the Passover. Okay, so before we answer that question, let's look at one or two more verses. Let's look at Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, chapter 8, verse 17. So we'll go to Nehemiah. Oops. Where did Nehemiah run off to? Nehemiah. There we go. Nehemiah chapter 8. And we'll just go to the English for a second. So again, we have a kind of a similar situation, okay, that basically there's kind of renewing of the covenant, or a rededication of the effort to keep the laws. Okay, so here we'll start in Nehemiah 7. When the 7th month came and the Israelites had settled in their towns, so these are the exiles returning from Babylon, right? Nehemiah is basically the head; he's like the governor, and Ezra is a priest. Okay, so it says all the people came together as one in the square before the water gate. They told Ezra, the teacher of the law, to bring out the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had commanded for Israel. So on the first day of the 7th month, Ezra, the priest, brought the law before the assembly, which was made up of men and women, all who were able to understand. He read it aloud from daybreak till noon as he faced the square before the water gate in the presence of the men, women, and others who can understand. And all the people listened attentively to the book of the law. And we'll just skip ahead a little bit. Okay. And it says in verse 9, then Nehemiah the governor, Ezra the priest and teacher of the law, and the Levites who were instructing the people said to them all, this day is holy to Yahweh your God. Do not mourn or weep, for all the people had been weeping as they listened to the words of the law. What are we talking about? It says explicitly when this was. This was on the first day of the 7th month. Okay? So we're talking about Yom Teruah, what the rabbis incorrectly call Rosh Hashanah, right? So the people are listening to Nehemiah and Ezra, or actually Ezra, read the book of the law, the book of the Torah, okay? And the people are weeping, okay? Why were they weeping? They were weeping because they realized they really hadn't been keeping the law. That's why they were weeping. They're finding out about this law as if for the first time. It's almost like the story of Josiah, right? Hilkiah finds the book of the Torah in the temple, tells Josiah, and Josiah is very upset, and he basically starts keeping the law, right? So here, it's not that a written Torah had been found, but the people were ignorant of it. They didn't know it, and now they're being told what the law is and explained what the law is, and they're upset, okay? And then Nehemiah says, right here, this day is holy to Yahweh your God. Do not mourn or weep, for all the people have been weeping as they listen to the words of the law. Okay? Nehemiah said, go and enjoy choice food and sweet drinks and send some to those who have nothing prepared. This day is holy to Yahweh. Do not grieve, for the joy of Yahweh is your strength. Okay? And this is talking about Yom Teruah. Now we'll skip ahead a little bit. Okay? And here in verse 14, they find out on the second day, the day after, okay, the second day of the month, they're reading again. And they found written in the law, which Yahweh had commanded through Moses, that the Israelites were to live in temporary shelters during the festival of the 7th month. Okay? So they go out, they bring back the 4 species to build the Sukkot with. That's another story. And then what it says here, and this is now talking about the holiday of Sukkot, obviously, in verse 17, the whole company that had returned from exile built temporary shelters and lived in them. From the days of Joshua, the son of Nun, until that day, the Israelites had not celebrated like this, and their joy was very great. And I want to look at this in the Hebrew. So this is Nehemiah 8:17. Let's look at this in the Hebrew. Oops. What did I do here? 8, I just replicated it. So we want to go over here to the Hebrew. Oh, I just had it. Whoops. Nehemiah 8:17. Okay. So the Hebrew says, "V'yasu kol hakahal hashavin min hashavi." So the entire congregation that had returned from the captivity, meaning from Babylon, Sukkot, Yasu Sukkot, they made Sukkot, V'yeshvu b'Sukkot, and they dwelled in the Sukkot, they lived in the Sukkot, Ki lo asu mimei Yeshua bin Nun, ken b'nei Yisrael ad hayom hahu, v'ti'i simcha gedola ma'od, because, and this is, the English translation is actually an interpretation or an extrapolation, but what it literally says is, so they lived in Sukkot, Ki lo asu mimei Yeshua bin Nun, ken, because they had not done so since the days of Yeshua ben Nun. Ken b'nei Israel, because the children of Israel had not done so since the days of Yeshua ben Nun, ad hayom hahu, until that day. V'ti'i simcha gedola ma'od, and there was very great rejoicing. Okay, so if we read the words literally here, this would imply that since the days of Yeshua ben Nun, the Israelites had not dwelt in Sukkot. Okay, so we have a very similar phrase here in Nehemiah 8:17 that we do to, where was it? Oops, now I lost it. It was 2 Kings. Yeah. Let's go back. Okay. Let's go back. 2 Kings 23. Okay. Okay, I've got to go to Hebrew. 2 Kings 23, 21. Actually 22. Okay, so here we have regarding the Passover, ki lo na'asa kepesach hazeh, because oh, my cat just walked inside. Hold on a second. Lavi, what's sweetheart? Vuvu. I was just gonna lie down. Okay, I just don't want him to piss. Sometimes he decides he wants to mark his territory, and so I have to watch him like a hawk sometimes. Ki lo na'asa kepesach hazeh, because a Passover like this had not been done since the days of the judges who judged Israel, and throughout all of the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. That's speaking about the Passover when Josiah finds or is told about the law, the book of the law, the book of the Torah, and reinstates a bunch of commandments, including the Passover. Okay, so this verse would imply that the Passover had not been done since the time of the judges. This verse here, let's read this. Start here. Read this verse one more time. V'yasu kol hakahal hashavim min hashavi, and all of the congregation that had returned from the exile, from the Babylonian exile, asu Sukkot, they made Sukkot, v'yeshvu b'Sukkot, and they dwelled in the Sukkot, ki lo asu mimei Yeshua bin Nun, ken, because they had not done ken b'nei Israel, because the children of Israel had not done so since the days of Yeshua bin Nun, ad hayom hahu, until that very day. Okay, so with these two verses, this verse here, 2 Kings 23:22, would imply that the Passover had not been kept since the days of the judges. Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 17 would imply that Sukkot had not been kept since the days that the children of Israel had not dwelled in Sukkot since the days of Yeshua ben Nun. Okay, is that correct? Is that so? Well, another explanation, I think maybe a more correct explanation, is that really what these verses mean is, yes, it seems in the case of Josiah that maybe for many years they had not kept the Passover because they had lost the written book of the Torah itself, right? But it would seem to imply perhaps that these verses mean that such an amazing Passover, a Passover as great as this, had not been done since the days of the judges and throughout all the years of the kings. Just as here in Nehemiah, it might imply not that they hadn't kept Sukkot since the time of Yeshua ben Nun, because really that wouldn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion, right? We did have righteous kings, we had righteous judges. They would have caused the nation or encouraged the nation to celebrate these holidays. So maybe what this means, or another explanation, is that what this means is that such a Sukkot, such a happy Sukkot, had not been, such an amazing Sukkot had not been kept since the days of Yeshua ben Nun. In other words, this may not be meant to be taken literally, but is more kind of an idiom to say that a Passover like this had not been kept since the days of the judges. A Sukkot like this had not been kept since the days of Yeshua ben Nun. On the other hand, we can say that if we look at Passover, the word Passover in the concordance, and I'll just end on this point in just a minute. Second, that we see, well, here we have Joshua. Okay, this is in order. Okay, so in Joshua 5, that's when the Israelites enter the land of Israel and they start eating from the produce of the land on Passover. And the next time Passover is mentioned is actually in 2 Kings 23. Passover is never mentioned at any other time between Joshua, when they enter the land, and 2 Kings 23. So maybe they didn't celebrate the Passover. Okay, let's just look here in 2 Chronicles 30. Leave him. He's so peaceful. Why do you have to bother him? He's just lying there peacefully. Now you know he's going to get upset and run out. So this is now speaking about in the time of Cheskiyahu. Okay, in 2 Chronicles 30. Just look at this for a second. Please, Volky, please, I'm trying to do this. So Hezekiah celebrates the Passover, it's mentioned, but Hezekiah is after Josiah, right? I'm almost sure. Let me just verify that. Okay. Where's the list of kings? There we go. No. So Josiah is after Hezekiah. Okay, so there we go. So now we have absolute proof that that is not the case, at least based on 2 Chronicles. Okay. So there we go. So Hezekiah celebrates the Passover. So Hezekiah is the 1, 2, 3 kings before Josiah. And we have in 2 Chronicles 31 that Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and Judah and also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh inviting them to come to the temple of Yahweh in Jerusalem and celebrate the Passover to Yahweh, the God of Israel. Okay? The king and his officials and the whole assembly in Jerusalem decided to celebrate the Passover in the second month. They had not been able to celebrate it at the regular time because not enough priests had consecrated themselves and the people had not assembled in Jerusalem. The plan seemed right to both the king and to the whole assembly. They decided to send a proclamation throughout Israel from Beersheba to Dan, calling the people to come to Jerusalem and celebrate the Passover to Yahweh, the God of Israel. It had not been celebrated in large numbers according to what was written. Okay? So here seems to be, it's definitely celebrated, right, as a public ceremony in the time of Hezekiah. So that would seem to imply that these verses here, okay, that it had not been celebrated from the time of the judges. And in Nehemiah, that Sukkot had not been celebrated from the time of Yeshua ben Nun would seem to imply that it had not been celebrated in such a great way since those times. In other words, it's kind of an expression just showing how happy and great those celebrations were. Because in the time of Hezekiah, we see that explicitly the people did celebrate the Passover. But then again, it says it had not been celebrated in large numbers according to what had been written. So maybe, well, this would seem to imply that in that year they did celebrate it in large numbers. So maybe the verses mean they really didn't celebrate it very well until these days, or they barely celebrated it at all, or maybe it's just an idiom, meaning that such a great celebration had not been seen in a long, long time. Okay. At any rate, so that's 2 Chronicles 30. I'm just going to mark that down for myself. One second. Okay, so I think what it tends to mean is actually that such a Passover had not been celebrated in many, many, many years. And here, such a Sukkot, in Nehemiah, such a Sukkot had not been celebrated in many, many years. Not that they had not celebrated at all, but this was such a great celebration. The happiness was so great, as it says here, for instance, the case of Sukkot, V'ti'i simcha gdola ma'od, and there was great rejoicing, right? And over here, this was like the renewal of the Passover in God knows how many years. So it was considered such a great event that, figuratively speaking, it's like it's such a Passover had not been celebrated since the days of the judges. Okay, so that's that. Let's end maybe with in the book of Ezra, chapter 6, verse 19. Where Ezra talks about the Passover after the dedication of the temple. So the temple is dedicated here. The temple is completed. Okay. And they have a feast. And then it says in verse 19, this is Ezra 6:19, V'yasu b'nei hagola et hapasach be'arba'a asar lechodesh harishon, and the children of the exile, of the captivity. So in other words, again, the Israelites that had returned, the Jews that had returned from Babylon, did the Passover sacrifice on the 14th day of the first month, right? After sunset on the 14th day, meaning at the very beginning of the 15th day. Ki hitharu hakohanim halewiim ke'ahad kulam te'orim wayishhatu hapesach lechol bnei hagola u'la'achem hakohanim wa'lachem. Okay? Because the Kohanim and the Levites had kulam te'orim, were all purified. In other words, they were in a state of ritual purity so that they could handle the Passover sacrifices. Okay, ke'achad, all as one or unanimously. V'yishchatu hapesach lechol bnei hagola, and they slaughtered the Passover offering for all of the children of the captivity, of the exile, the captivity, u'le'achem hakohanim u'lehem, and for their brothers the Kohanim, and for themselves. Okay. Verse 21, V'yochlu b'nei Israel hashavim mehagola l'chol hanivdal mitu'umat goei haaretz alehem lidrosh li'yahweh Elohei Yisrael. And the children of Israel who returned from the captivity ate of it, v'chol hanivdal mitu'umat goei haaretz. The children of Israel and all of those who had separated themselves from the impurity of the people of the land. Okay. 1 second. ויאכלו בני ישראל השבים מהגולה וכל הנבדל מטומאת גויי הארץ עליהם לדרוש ליהווה Elohei Israel. And they came to inquire of Yahweh, the God of Israel. V'yasu Chag Matzot, and notice that they don't call Passover Pesach or anything like that. Chag Matzot, that's the festival of unleavened bread. That's the 7-day holiday that follows or that starts at the same time, that right after you bring the Passover offering, or as you bring the Passover offering. Verse 22. V'yasu Chag Matzot Shivat Yamim B'Simcha, and they celebrated the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days with rejoicing. Ki simcham Yahweh, because Yahweh had made them happy. Vasev lev Melech Ashur alehem, and the king, the heart of the king of Assyria had turned away from them. Nechazek yadem b'milechet beit Elohim, and they were able to. The king of Assyria had wanted to thwart their building of the temple, the second temple. Nechazek yadehem, and they strengthened their hands b'melechet beit Elohim, in the work required for building the house of God, Elohei Israel, the God of Israel. Okay, so we see that the returning exiles from Babylon brought the Passover offering. After building the second temple, they brought the Passover offering, and they celebrated Chag HaMatzot in great happiness for 7 days. And so I think this is a good and proper and happy place to end, right? Just as the exiles from Babylon returned to the land of Israel, rebuilt the temple, and celebrated the Passover offering, or brought the Passover offering and celebrated the Chag HaMatzot, the festival of unleavened bread. So let us, all of us soon, all of us Israelites, and the few very, very dedicated Gerim who have every right to join on to the people of Israel, let us all next year be in Jerusalem and celebrating the Passover offering and celebrating the Chag HaMatzot, the Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. And we will end on that. All right. And let's put on a song.
בירושלים, לשנה הבאה, 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 בירושלים.
Okay. So before we end, any questions, any comments? Anybody? Questions or comments? No? In that case, I think we're going to end the class. It's been a long class. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got a lot out of it. And I wish everybody a Chag HaMatzot Sameach. Enjoy the remainder of your Chag HaMatzot. Enjoy with your family. Have good food. Have lots of matzah, which you can easily make at home. We made this morning some wonderful matzot. It's very easy. And yeah, I think I've described the recipe elsewhere, but I wish everybody a wonderful Chag HaMatzot and enjoy the rest of your holiday. Okay, so I'm going to end the talk here. And if you have any questions, just feel free, of course, to just text me privately and I'll be happy to answer the questions. We'll go out with a little bit of music.
Okay.
Ruth?
Press the button.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. He pressed the
Yeah.
button. It's an excellent class.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it very much. I wrote down all the scriptures that you wrote down. I'm going to study them. And it's excellent. And I hope you do very well with the rabbis.
It'll be fine. I'm just not going to mention anything having to do with Karaism tomorrow. Or if I do,
Okay.
it won't. I'll keep it kind of subtle. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
All right. Any questions before we go, Ruth?
No, that's good. That's good.
All right.
Everything's going well.
All right.
I understand it much better now.
Excellent. I'm glad you do. All right. I wish you guys a good evening and a happy
Yes.
Passover.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. All right.